Hey guys, tonight we're trying something a bit different. No massive battles, no cursed fortresses, no enigmatic empresses with deadly jewels. Tonight you're waking up as a regular guy in Victorian England. Your mission? Just surviving the next 24 hours. Seems simple, doesn't it? You won't believe how much can unfold in a single day. You'll sense the chill against your face, the stiffness in your collar, and the burden of a society founded on etiquette, soot, and silent expectations. By the finish, you might stop grumbling about your own morning alarm. All right, before you settle in too comfortably, go on and hit that like button and subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. Let me know down in the comments, where are you tuning in from? What's the hour over there? Turn down the lights, get that fan running for some ambient sound, and let's ease into tonight's brief journey. The second your eyelids flutter open, your teeth almost rattle. The space is freezing. The fire went out ages ago. Your breath comes out in little clouds above your lips. Beyond the walls, there's the distant clack of hooves against stone and the empty groan of wind pushing through the warped timber of the sash window. You're not wealthy, not destitute either. You're stuck in the middle. A bookkeeper, maybe. A fellow with a respectable jacket and scuffed footwear. You lease a chamber on the 3rd story of a groaning boarding house in London. The paper on the walls curls where it touches the ceiling, and your chamber pot rests iced over like a quiet menace beneath the bed. No delay option, no lamp beside you. Just you, a thin strip of grey dawn, and the subtle scent of coal drifting up from the stove below. You slip out from under a woolen cover and rough linen. Each shift makes your body pop in complaint. The timber floor feels frigid and bumpy under your soles. You drag yourself towards the wash table where a bowl of water rests frozen around its rim. Dunking your fingertips into it burns. Your personal penalty for neglecting to warm water last evening. You rinse your face regardless. Cleanliness, after all, has become more than merely trendy. It's a sign of respectability. Soap isn't cheap, but you maintain a piece wrapped in fabric so it stays firm. No running water indoors. You tip leftover liquid from the jug, drag a dull, straight razor across your jaw, and pat your chin with a worn towel, rigid from last week's washing. Victorian gentlemen are supposed to appear refined. Sloppy means careless. Careless means questionable. Next comes the looking glass. Fractured down one edge. You study yourself as you divide your hair cleanly through the centre and control it with pomade. Your moustache needs to be precisely right, not overly dense or unruly, or you'll resemble a revolutionary, or even worse, a German. You move to the corner where your garments dangle, pants, vest, collar, necktie, coat. No stretch, no fasteners, just clasps, suspenders and routine. You layer up, not for appearance but for warmth. That coat with the ink mark on the arm, still serviceable. You press it with your hand and attempt not to cringe at how thin it's becoming around the edges. A set of boots sits by the entrance, still covered with hardened muck from the day before. You moisten a cloth with spit and scrub until they look acceptable. You loop your pocket watch chain through the buttonhole and slip the timepiece where it belongs. A fellow who can't tell the time in Victorian London might as well be invisible. Below, somebody's already loading coal into the stove. It's Mrs. Gilliflower, the woman who owns the house. She hums church tunes with disturbing enthusiasm for such an early moment. You acknowledge her as you move past in the corridor. Don't pause, or she'll corner you in discussion about the moisture problem in the cellar. You snatch your hat. Derby style, not silk. Silk hats belong to financiers and gentlemen with less filth in their everyday travels. Yours got slightly crushed in the rear when you stumbled on Fleet Street last week and almost fell into a fishmonger's wagon. When you step outdoors, the metropolis exhales its dirty vapour into your face. Smoke spirals from chimneys like dark ink in liquid. The cobbled stones glisten with rain from overnight and this morning's animal waste. The heavens look like thin broth stuck between amber and grey. Another morning starts. The instant your boot touches pavement, the world springs to life surrounding you. A chimney sweep kid rushes by like a phantom. his face darkened, naked feet smacking the frigid stones. A dairy worker clangs bottles in the passageway. Close by, somebody's already bickering over onion prices. You pull your collar closer and move down the lane, your breath hanging in the morning haze. This early, the metropolis seems like it's owned by spirits and labourers. You walk past a couple of waste collectors pushing their sloshing wagon along the street. Eyes lowered, faces covered in fabric, you keep your distance. Even in this era, where stink is routine, certain odours are unbearable. Before the morning meal, the stores remain shuttered, but a bread maker has started opening his establishment. The aroma of fresh loaves cuts through the coal fumes. A starving mutt paces out front, tail hanging, wishing for a scrap. You think about purchasing a roll, just one, but your money pouch is light this week. You needed to buy starch for your shirt collar, and that itself ran $1.50. Your belly protests, but dignity keeps your posture firm. You hop over a puddle, not due to water, but due to the dense green muck that's collected at its border. You touch down and adjust your jacket. A gentleman, even a humble one, never shows up with soiled pants. Now you encounter a fellow lodger, Mr. Blythe, a wandering vendor of ribbons and stockings. He touches his hat and gives a greeting the way gentlemen do. Quick, efficient, no continuation. Discussion this early seems suspicious, unless it concerns the climate, which currently is frigid, wet, and penetrating. You nod and continue, observing his boots vanish into the mist. There's a brief instance of quiet before the city really awakens. The horses haven't started their noisy racket in earnest. The mills haven't blown their sharp signals. It's the short pause between darkness and work. Some describe it as tranquil. Others describe it as the time when obligations speak most clearly. Your mind wanders. Maybe today will be when the manager acknowledges your enhancements to the accounting method, or perhaps that reserved widow on the second story will finally say more than a couple words. Then again, maybe it'll be identical to every day, lengthy, freezing and barely sustainable. At the intersection, a news vendor stands on a timber crate shouting updates you can't quite catch over the echoing clatter of an approaching wagon. He's got ink-smeared digits and a voice like gravel. You peek at the front pages. A shaft failure up north, a controversy involving a nobleman and a housemaid, a cheap thriller about bloodsuckers in Manchester, all printed with somewhat uneven letters on coarse grey sheets. You don't purchase a copy. You already understand enough terrible things from the workplace. As the illumination grows, the streets start to fill. Horse-drawn buses rumble past, each one a metallic and timber contraption of hooves and jostling. A fellow shouts for carriage payment and swears at the mud. A nanny shepherds 3 youngsters along the walkway, like waterfowl in formation, each with crimson cheeks and immaculately tied neck wraps. You tighten your gloves, not for style, but to prevent the ink from staining your skin. Later you'll be required to copy records all morning once more, and any blot will be viewed like a character flaw. As the bell rings the 30-minute mark, you're not quite tardy, but nearly. The morning has started to consume you, 60 seconds at a time. The metropolis shifts, and so do you. You arrive at the cramped courtyard behind the fabric merchant's shop, where your workplace sits squeezed between a tobacco cellar and a staircase that goes mysteriously nowhere. It's a structure that groans when nobody's near it. The front entrance resists until you push it with precisely the correct force, the same force you discovered the difficult way after ripping your coat seam last February. Within, the morning darkness seeps through the clouded glass. No gas illumination's been sparked, yet you navigate your way along the hallway by familiarity, passing Mr. Wexley's umbrella holder, perpetually damp, perpetually leaning, and suspend your hat on the peg that's second from the finish, the one that stays attached to the surface. Your workspace awaits, third from the left, a modest ink-marked piece of protesting timber and carved letters, mostly belonging to others. You attempted once to scratch your own name into a concealed section underneath, but the edge slipped and you wound up cutting your thumb. Still, the mark feels like proof of something. You settle and organise your items precisely. Pen, absorbent paper, record book, measuring stick. A gentleman's instruments reflect his character, or at minimum that's what Mr. Hargrave claims when he's attempting to sound wise. Hargrave hasn't arrived yet. Excellent. That provides you 10 minutes to inspect your collar for marks and refold your necktie once more just to be safe. The looking glass in the corner is fractured and spotted like aging fruit, but it functions. You straighten your sleeves and inhale slowly. Victorian gentlemen don't squirm, they adjust around you. The workplace starts to stir. Steps on stairs, clearing throats, the crisp sound of matches igniting for gas illumination. The glow wavers doubtfully before holding. The atmosphere carries hints of sulphur and something more acidic, ink, perspiration, aged wool. There's a far-off rattle of tea dishes from the rear chamber. You don't approach that kettle without invitation. Previous time you attempted and Mrs. Turnbull looked at you like you'd robbed her savings. Mr. Hargrave rushes in, 10 minutes behind as usual, flinging off his umbrella with excessive drama. His moustache is overgrown, his uppermost button hangs open, yet somehow he maintains authority. He tosses his gloves onto his workspace and announces, "Let's get something worthwhile from you people today. Agreed." You duck your head and fake being occupied. The previous fellow who talked back spent the following week transcribing bills for roofing materials. You commence your daily tasks, record book verification, cargo documents, coal shipments. The figures are endless. You absorb, you calculate, you attempt not to spill ink like you managed last Thursday. Your sleeves still bear the grudge. The sheets are rough, yellowed and somewhat moist. They bend at the boundaries as if resenting their purpose. Every 60 minutes or thereabouts, somebody makes a hushed remark about the supervisor's odour or Mrs. Turnbull's weasel-like stare. Amusement never extends past 5 seconds. Longer, and it attracts notice. This is a location of structure, decorum, and the pretence of advancement. If you labour diligently enough, perhaps they'll permit you to oversee the storage chamber by Christmas. Or perhaps not. Beyond the mantle, a worn inspirational sign reads, "Labour is the essence of advancement." The border is damaged. The essence of advancement smells vaguely of footwear. Past the pane, the haze starts to clear just enough for illumination to filter through. You can distinguish outlines on the avenue, men in work clothes, a woman in a dark cape with a container of eggs, 2 lads scuffling with caps gripped in hands. You observe for an instant, then return to your calculations. You have 20 additional receipts to record before the midday break, and if you neglect to mark them again, Mrs. Turnbull will inform you. Through her frightening quiet, you dip your pen. The morning drags forward. The workplace doesn't hum. It clicks, taps, and coughs. Everyone maintains a pattern, and yours moves quicker than most. Not from aspiration, really. More like a steady, persistent nervousness that if you decelerate, somebody will take notice. And in this location, being observed is hazardous. A cold current sneaks beneath the window frame and freezes your lower legs. You consider briefly approaching to warm your palms by the heating unit. But the recent hire attempted that yesterday and was instructed sharply, "This isn't a sitting room." So instead you exhale into your knuckles and continue scratching figures into the record book, attempting not to smear the sheets with dampness. At 10:30, the entrance creaks once more, and in steps Mr. Ellery from the upper level, perpetually too formal, perpetually with a walking stick he has no need for. He's from the finance division and possesses a gift for materialising precisely as somebody commits an error. You straighten yourself. So does everybody. The chamber becomes slightly too motionless, like prey pretending to be stones. Ellery acknowledges and speaks something regarding quarterly calculations. You don't catch the remainder. You're too preoccupied pretending to disappear. He stays for an instant, lifts a partially completed form and examines it like a gemologist might a flawed stone. Then he grins, the sort of grin that conveys, "I could terminate you before the midday meal," and wanders out. You release your breath. Instants afterward, the murmurs return. Mr. Hargrave rotates his eyes. If that gentleman were any more refined, he'd slide on his own shine. He whispers, and a current of suppressed humour passes across the chamber. You grin also, just slightly, just adequately. As the morning progresses, the workplace becomes warmer, not due to the heating unit, but because the gas illumination has been sparked. They drone faintly, projecting sickly amber glow that eliminates every shadow and causes your temples to pulse. You discovered weeks past not to gaze directly at them. The illumination isn't gentle to headaches or hidden things. You browse through an earlier record book to verify a shipment, 3 tons of coal that never appear to show up. In the borders, somebody has sketched a tiny caricature of Mrs. Turnbull pursuing a fowl with a sweeping tool. You suppress a chuckle, then cautiously trace across the sheet so it stays undetected. Amusement is risky here, unless it's extremely, extremely understated. At 11:30, a shriek rings from the stairwell. It's Mrs. Greaves, from the hat shop. Upstairs, a rodent has scurried across her footwear. You hear a tea dish break and a broom crash. For one magnificent minute, the entire workplace listens like youngsters. Even Hargrave smiles. You all fake indifference, naturally, but everyone will recall that rodent for days. It's approaching midday. Your neck throbs. You reach backward to rub the tension just beyond your collar, and your fingertips touch a section of skin worn raw by your starched shirt. You consider loosening it, just one clasp, but that would be improper. You compromise by reclining instead, allowing the seat to groan like a caution. The midday meal approaches, and with it the mild excitement of men starting to anticipate, not regarding food necessarily, but regarding standing, regarding walking, regarding not staring at figures. For 20 complete minutes, you watch the timepiece and observe the hand crawl its path toward liberation. Then, at last, a soft clatter as Mr. Hargrave rises and extends. His spine pops like a weapon discharge. 12. Colleagues, let's not squander the monarch's sunshine. A weak jest, but it signals you may abandon your workspace. You rise gradually, bones rigid, mouth parched, legs partially numb. But your backbone is upright. A Victorian gentleman is nothing without composure, even in the centre of a work day. You don your hat, you sweep imaginary lint from your coat, and you proceed toward the avenues. Once more, the noon atmosphere strikes differently, not hotter, just noisier. The metropolis by midday is a creature, completely conscious. Vapour hisses from tubes beneath iron grids. Boys in caps weave between wagons. A street seller shouts regarding his root vegetables like they're riches. The racket of hooves and footwear is constant, like 1,000 timepieces ticking without coordination. You haven't much duration and not much currency either. The midday meal is a careful equilibrium between hunger, economy, and what your belly can endure. You contemplate the pastry stand attractive with its flaky shells and dense aroma of spiced flesh. But you recall the previous occasion the contents were questionable. One mouthful crunched, and you're reasonably certain flesh shouldn't crunch. Instead, you pursue instinct and custom to the intersection near St Dunstan's, where an elderly woman named Mrs. Creeley vends toast, tea, and something she describes as penny pudding from a tin booth with wheels that haven't rotated in years. Her booth carries the scent of boiled dried grapes and charred sweetener, reassuring if not wholly attractive. You wait behind a fellow with coal-darkened fingernails, and another in a derby too compact for his skull. Everyone feigns not acknowledging each other. Gentlemen in Victorian London seldom converse at the midday meal unless obligated. You maintain your hands in your pockets and your thoughts protected. When your moment arrives, you request toast and tea. It's the most reliable selection. The bread's scorched black on one side, still pale and yielding on the other, but it's hot and the tea's got enough bite to make you wince. There's a thin streak of molasses smeared across the plate, barely there but just enough to notice. It'll do. You lean against a brick wall in a narrow alley and eat on your feet. Nobody sits down here unless they've earned it the hard way. You chew slowly, letting your jaw handle the work your stomach's going to pay for later. The toast becomes a thick paste and the tea burns all the way down. But there's something steadying about the routine. You've swallowed worse than this. Just around the bend, the well-off types drift past. You catch them in full view. Gleaming leather shoes, silk neckties, vests sewn in shades yours wouldn't dream of wearing. They move in twos, discussing stock trades and property disputes and how terrible last night's performance was at the theatre. You act like you can't hear them, but you always can. One time a fellow from that bunch paused and studied you, said you brought his manservant to mind. You gave a polite nod, but something inside went sour. Not rage, just a slow, steady awareness that it doesn't matter how pressed your collar is or how neat your penmanship gets, somebody's always going to see you as scenery. On the far side of the plaza, a sightless accordion player works through a shaky melody that's off-pitch but oddly calming. A little mutt sits beside him, eyes drooping, tail thumping gently on the stones. You drop a half-cent in the tin, not from kindness, but because of the dog. The city reeks of cinders, livestock, seafood, and fumes. But now and then a trace of cologne, a bakery's rear entrance, or the sharp scent of citrus rind breaks through. You cling to those fragments. They don't come often. You finish your toast. Your teeth still scrape against a charred corner. You slip the metal spoon into your pocket, everybody does, and wipe your hands on a cloth that's lived through better decades. On the other side of the road, St. Dunstan's bell rings once, noon. The hours move quick. When things aren't miserable, you take one more breath of outside air, and then, with those same measured steps, you head back to the record books, shelves, and gaslit alcoves that fill your weekdays. Inside again, the structure welcomes you with the usual smell of aged documents, tired timber, and slight mould. The hearth has died out once more, and nobody bothers to restart it. The afternoon cold sneaks in beneath doorways and through your shoes. You work your fingers once, twice, before lifting the pen again. It's bone dry. You dip the nib and begin fresh, taking care to dodge the hardened rim of the ink jar. Lunch never truly fills you. It's not meant to. It's more like a marker, something to split the dull hours apart. The meat pie cart, the bread wagon, the broth vendor if you're feeling bold. None of it satisfies you as much as it reminds you where you stand. A body in motion, never quite at rest, never quite having arrived. Somebody on the other side of the space sneezes wetly into a handkerchief and goes right back to their accounts like it never happened. Nobody even blinks. Disease science is in the papers, sure, but here in this office, sickness still feels more like bad luck than biology. You've watched men hack up blood and finish out the week before collapsing at their workstations. Nobody takes time away, not unless it's forever. You look down at your hands. Ink marks have settled in permanently. You scrub at them, but they've soaked deep into the creases of your palm, a lasting mark of what you do. Mr. Hargrave walks behind you, without speaking. His footsteps creak in a pattern you've learned to fear. 4 paces, a pause, then a pivot. He always lingers near your station. Not today, though. That feels even more unsettling somehow. A thin envelope shows up around 2 o'clock. Plain, aged paper, addressed in that overly proper, overly curled handwriting your brother always uses. You slide it into your jacket pocket. You'll wait until you're back at your room to open it. Not because there isn't time, but because you need solitude. Men in this era don't weep at their stations, not even for brothers still trapped in the steel mills up in Sheffield. By mid-afternoon, your gut's twisting up again, not from emptiness, from tension, Your vision blurs, staring at the figures. The ink bleeds too fast on this flimsy paper, turning every number into a smear. You squeeze the pen tighter. Somewhere nearby, someone keeps clicking their tongue, over and over, unconsciously, like a steady pulse of annoyance. You keep quiet. Office survival here is ruthless but unspoken. The more noise you make, the closer you get to being let go. You picture switching professions. You picture America. You picture boarding a train to the coast and disappearing for good. But every one of those dreams needs cash, and your footwear has a tear in the left bottom that you mend every 7 days with scrap paper. At 3, you get up to stretch your back and glance outside again. The haze has rolled back in, denser than before. You can't make out the far side of the avenue. Out there somewhere, wagons rattle, kids shout, and bells sound. But in here among your record books, the clock barely moves. Then there's a knock. A kid from the lower floor, a runner in a tattered blue coat, passes you a folded scrap with Hargrave's mark on it. You're wanted in the storage room. You go. The storage room is colder, tighter, darker. 1 seat, 1 lantern, and a pile of fresh ledgers waiting to be organised. You're told to start the count. It's dull work, but you handle it well. So you settle in, unwrap the first volume, and start tallying. The hours disappear like vapour in freezing air. Your spine aches, your eyes sting, but the pages keep turning, and finally, when the clock strikes 5, Mr. Hargrave clears his throat from the corridor. That's sufficient. Nothing else. No compliment, no acknowledgement, but your shift is over. You lay down the pen and stretch your fingers one final time. They're rigid, stained black, streaked and trembling slightly, but they survived, and so did you. The second you step back outside, the atmosphere has shifted. It's thicker now, saturated with ash and the damp exhale of countless chimneys. The haze that crept in during work hours has become a yellowish mist that softens edges and turns gas lamps into faint glows. You tug your coat closer around your ribs and start the walk home, boots clicking softly on slick pavement. The city at twilight isn't peaceful. It's louder than morning, more tangled up in itself. The avenues fill with a different kind of urgency, not ambition but retreat. Everyone's trying to reach home wherever that might be. You sidestep carts piled high with boxes, hear the snap of frustrated drivers' whips. A stray dog yelps somewhere behind you, kicked away by a boot or broom handle. You don't turn around. You pass 3 kids balancing on coal sacks, laughing as they shove one another. Their faces are striped with dirt, their laughter shrill and jarring against the deep rumble of hooves. One of them whistles a tune you don't recognise, though it rings strangely familiar, almost like a hymn. It takes a while to find the rhythm of the street. You avoid puddles from memory alone. You know which back alley stinks too much of decaying fish, which corner always collects chimney soot, and yet something's always new. Today, it's a banana skin crushed into the cobblestone, an odd fruit still uncommon around here. Someone with money must have tossed it. A streetcar rattles past, dragged by 2 exhausted horses with steam rising from their backs. The conductor yells at someone trying to hop on mid-roll. You glimpse inside, men clutching newspapers like shields, women in gloves staring through windows like royalty on display. You keep walking, you're getting close to the river now, and the air starts carrying its particular odour, stale, briny, faintly like metal. The fog mixes into it, and the whole street starts feeling dreamlike. Gas lamps flicker in pairs, lighting your route unevenly. Some have fractured glass, some burn with a bluish tint. You move beneath them like a shadow passing between realms. As you go, you pick up on the sounds layered beneath the obvious ones. A cab driver muttering curses to himself. A mother calling her kid's name with more exhaustion than worry. The endless clang of a blacksmith's hammer down a side street, still ringing even at this hour. Your path home cuts through Fleet Street, where the newspaper offices burn bright from inside, small furnaces of chaos. You can see shapes moving, pacing, debating, scribbling. You once thought about trying your hand as a journalist, but you don't have the swagger or the connections. You stop for a moment to let a funeral procession go by. 4 men in black carrying a simple coffin to a hearse pulled by horses. No wreaths, no followers, just the clop of hooves and the slap of leather straps. You take off your hat, not because anyone's looking, just because it seems right. As you keep moving, the city gets darker. Lamplighters work ahead of you, lifting their long poles toward the gas fixtures, bringing light with each tap. It's strangely beautiful, this nightly dance of flame and fog. One of them nods your way. You nod back. These are the small agreements men make without saying a word. Your boots squelch a little with every step. That hole in the sole is getting bigger. You'll patch it again tonight with leftover paper and wax. It's routine by now. Then, just as you reach the block where your lodging stands, you pass a pharmacy window. There's a fresh tonic advertised for energy and vitality in the modern gentleman. It's probably loaded with liquor, opium, or both. You think about it for a second, then move on. You made it through another commute. The city didn't swallow you today. You arrive at your entrance just as the wind picks up, carrying the sharp chill of river moisture and coal dust. The street behind you fades into the evening murk, a mess of silhouettes, gaslight halos, and the occasional gleam of carriage lights. You pat down your coat pockets, key, cloth, the folded note from your brother, then slip through the warped wooden door of the lodging house. Inside, it's shadowy and cramped. The weak smell of boiled cabbage hangs around like a memory refusing to fade from the corridor. A gas fixture sputters weakly. You walk past Mrs. Gilliflower's door. She's bickering with her bird again. You climb the stairs slowly, one step at a time, careful to avoid the bent third board. You know this staircase better than most faces you've met. At the landing, your room receives you with its usual hush. The floorboards groan as you enter, closing the door with a quiet click that feels definitive. You hang your coat on the peg, pull off your boots, and check the damp spot in your left sock. The hole's expanded. You make a note to yourself. Tomorrow newsprint and wax once more. You light the small lamp beside the bed. It throws a weary glow. Everything here feels weary, really. The chair with its unravelling woven seat, the wash basin with its chipped rim, the cracked mirror that tilts a bit more every month. Even the bed, low and lumpy, seems to droop in surrender. You sit down, breathe for a beat. Nothing occurs, and that, oddly enough, is the most valuable part of your day. But you can't stay idle long. There's still your appearance to tend to before supper, modest as it is. You remove your necktie and check your collar. A faint ring of sweat stains the inner edge, but nothing shameful. You run your hand through your hair, smooth your shirt, and brush your moustache back into place. Even now, how you look matters, especially in communal dining spaces, where every glance is a calculated social manoeuvre. You hear a bell clang downstairs twice. Dinner signal. You rise with a slow stretch that feels almost indulgent. And you open the narrow drawer beside your bed and pull out a tiny tin of shoe polish. No time to buff them now, but knowing it's there soothes you, a minor preparation for the next commute, the next dawn, the next wet puddle you won't dodge. As you head into the corridor, you pass young Mr. Olver, the printer's apprentice, who nods without expression. He's wearing the same jacket as the day before, and the smell of ink wraps around him like smoke. You nod back. You don't talk. Men here seldom do. In hallways, conversation is saved for rooms with furniture. You go downstairs to the ground floor eating room, where 6 chairs surround a battered pine table. The light is feeble, the quiet even weaker. Mr. Hargood, who fixes eyeglasses, is already seated, spoon halfway to his mouth. The stew smells faintly of lamb, more strongly of root vegetables. Nobody questions what else might be floating in it. You take your spot, mutter a greeting, and get 3 grunts and a cough in response. Mrs. Gilliflower shuffles in after you and starts doling out servings. You receive a shallow bowl, half a roll, and a chipped cup of tea strong enough to make your eyes water. Nobody objects. This is the hour of silent chewing, the clink of spoons against ceramic, the soft rustle of a shared newspaper between bites. Here, rank fades. You all come back from your separate wars, equally drained, equally mute. When your bowl is scraped clean, you slide it forward and look around. Still nobody's talking, not even Mrs. Gilliflower. It's the kind of calm only exhaustion can create, and it suits you perfectly. The dining space empties bit by bit, chairs scraping in uneven beats, boots shuffling over warped planks. You're one of the last to go, not from slowness, but from a quiet unwillingness to face your room just yet. There's something deeply sad about the moment after dinner when your belly is just full enough to remind you how empty you were and your brain is too tired to pretend anything interesting could happen next. Back upstairs, you toss your gloves onto the seat and undo your collar button. At last, the relief is small, but it tastes like triumph. You roll your sleeves up to your elbows and sit at your desk, if that's what it deserves to be called. It's a crate, flipped sideways, with an old record book stretched over the surface like a tablecloth nobody ever cleaned. There's a pencil stub, a torn envelope, and the letter from your brother, still sealed. You touch it lightly, then slide it under the desk. Not now. Instead, you grab your favourite pipe. Not the fancy one with the ivory mouthpiece, that's for Sundays, but the solid, cracked briar that's been with you since '77. You pack it with cheap tobacco and strike a match. The flame jumps briefly, then holds. The smell is earthy, warm, slightly bitter. It saturates the room in moments. Evening in a boarding house like this is solitary living disguised as shared space. Through the thin partition, you hear someone coughing, a deep rattling sound that probably belongs to Mr. Olver, the apprentice. 2 walls away, someone drops a chamber pot with a loud crash, followed by a muffled curse. It makes you smile. You lean back and let your gaze rest on the ceiling. The plaster's cracked in one spot, spreading slowly like a web spun by time itself. You find yourself thinking about the office again, not the tasks, but the faces. Hargrave's endless frown. Mrs. Turnbull's tiny spectacles sitting like judgment, and the gaslight that hums louder the longer you stare at it. There's a knock at your door, not forceful, not rushed. You freeze for a heartbeat, pipe halfway to your lips. "Come in," says a voice. Female, gentle. You know it. Mrs. Older, the widow from room 6. She sometimes borrows matches or sugar, sometimes just needs company. You open the door. She's holding a copy of the Illustrated London News from last week, folded precisely. "Done with it," she says. "Thought you'd enjoy the piece on the Great Eastern." You accept it, nod, thank her. You both understand it's a pretext for connection, and neither of you objects. You don't ask her inside. She doesn't expect it. Not here. Not that way. Instead, you exchange a few words about the weather, the fog, the stew being less dreadful than usual. Then she nods and disappears back down the hallway. You settle back down, the paper now open before you. The article is brief. A few lines about shipbuilding, new machinery and some politicians' remarks, but it's sufficient. You read every word, as if it matters. Men in this era aren't known for voicing their dreams, but as the pipe smoke drifts toward the cracked ceiling, you imagine yourself far from this cramped room aboard the Great Eastern, maybe sailing toward a wider world, somewhere without ledgers, somewhere warm. You know you'll never leave, but you let yourself imagine it all the same. You fold the newspaper with the same care you might fold a goodbye note and set it on the desk beside your pipe. The tobacco's gone cold, but you don't relight it. The room is already thick with smoke clinging to the curtains, your clothes, your very flesh. A scent that will trail you into tomorrow like a spectre. You reach for the old leather notebook you keep hidden beneath the floorboard. You don't open it, not tonight, but your fingers rest on the worn binding. It's a ritual, a superstition, almost like prayer. Inside are pages covered with thoughts, fragments, small hopes you can't speak aloud. Plans for a shop, a diagram for a better ledger system, half of a poem you abandoned. There's even a rough sketch of a seaside village you've never visited. You slide the notebook back into its hiding spot. No need for Mrs. Gilliflower or anyone else to discover it and start asking. Dreams, after all, aren't something men like you are supposed to showcase. Better to keep them buried, safe beneath splinters and grime. To occupy yourself, you polish your boots once more. You already did it yesterday, but it gives your hands purpose. The left boot still leaks. You cut a fresh square of newsprint to stuff into the toe, layering it between wax paper and wool. It's a temporary fix for a permanent problem, but that's how most things operate in your world. Patched, padded, delayed. From outside comes the low chime of the city clock striking 7. You picture it without looking. The old tower hunched between taller structures, its brass bell tarnished but dignified. That sound marks the end of possibility for the evening. No shop will serve you now, no mail posted, no errands completed. The world is closing its shutters. You wash your face with a rag dipped in cold water, then dry it on the towel hanging by the basin. It still smells faintly of starch. You'd planned to visit the laundry last Sunday, but the rain had different plans. The cloth stiffens when it dries. It always does. Laundry in this era has no mercy. You sit again, staring at the envelope from your brother. The wax seal is broken from handling, the paper smudged. You think about Sheffield, how the air there is denser, darker, always churning with smoke from foundries and shouting workers. You think of your brother's hands, tougher than yours, always wrapped. You wonder if they still bleed. You open the letter. The handwriting is compact, efficient. He's doing all right. The work pays, but barely enough. A man fell into a vat last week. They didn't halt production. He's considering the railroad or the military, whichever offers more. He asks if you're still at the same address, if you've managed to get promoted to a front desk, if the landlady still sings hymns. He signs off with a scrawl and a joke. Still have both hands for the moment. You fold the letter and place it in the drawer. There's nothing to respond with yet. You'll hold off until something shifts, or until next week. You glance again at your pipe, now completely cold. The coals in your little fireplace haven't been lit all winter. You can't afford the fuel, and the boarding house won't provide it. So you pull the blanket from the bed and wrap it around your shoulders. Outside, the fog presses against the glass like a held breath. Inside, you lean back in your chair, stare at the ceiling, and let the stillness hold you. This, too, is what men of this era do. The night deepens, and with it comes the strange silence of a building not quite asleep. You hear the occasional creak of a floorboard, someone shifting in bed, or crossing the hall with a candle stub. Pipes groan, wind whistles faintly through the gaps in the window frame. Homes in this era always speak after dark. You don't light your own candle. You know the room by feel, and besides, paraffin costs money. Instead, you sit in the dim glow of the hallway lamp, bleeding faintly under your door. Just enough light to see your hands, just enough to remember you're still here. You stretch your legs, then stand and move through the quiet rituals of evening, brushing lint from your jacket, laying out your trousers carefully for tomorrow, placing your watch on the nightstand so the ticking doesn't echo inside your vest all night. There's no such thing as shutting down for a man of this time. Even alone, even in darkness, you're thinking about wages, about tasks left undone, about what your posture communicates when you enter a room. There's a rigidity to manhood here, not in body, but in spirit. You carry it everywhere. Still, you have your outlets. In the top drawer of your cabinet, behind a faded prayer card and a dented shaving tin, you keep a small deck of cards, worn smooth, dog-eared, marked by fingers and spills and years. You pull them out now, spread them on the bedspread, and begin to deal. Not a game, a ritual. You lay them one by one, Face up and invent tiny stories. That the Queen of Hearts is the widow down the hall who once taught Greek to boys before her husband drowned. That the Nine of Clubs is your old schoolmaster who could never meet anyone's gaze. That the Ace of Spades is you. Exhausted, silent, impossible to read. It's foolish. You'd never confess it, but you do it every night. A knock interrupts your thoughts. Not at your door further along. 2 knocks gentle, then a door opening and closing. No voices, just footsteps. Slow, deliberate. You listen closely, but you know better than to pry too long. Boarding houses keep their secrets, and you've learned that knowing too much is often worse than knowing nothing. You return to the cards. You lay out another row. Then you hear it. The muffled thump of laughter. Male voices, hushed, secretive. Probably the 2 younger men from room 9. They think of themselves as thinkers after hours, smoking cheap tobacco and discussing revolution in whispers. It's harmless chatter, the kind that never leaves the building. You once tried to join their discussion, sat on the edge of a shared bed, offering a tentative comment about the Reform Act. They nodded politely, then continued without you. Your boots weren't polished enough, your views too careful. Or maybe it was just the way you said pardon instead of what. Office culture from this era follows you home. There's always someone measuring your value, even when nobody speaks. You sweep the cards back into their case and tuck them away. Then you turn to your shoes again. Yes, you polished them. Yes, they're drying. But still you kneel and check the heels, run your fingers along the seams. There's comfort in the familiar texture of leather, the quiet scrape of fabric over wax. A man in this time keeps his appearance not for pride but for survival. There's no reward for effort, no praise for keeping your collar pressed. But you keep doing it, because someone might notice if you stopped. You sit back on the edge of the bed, hands resting on your thighs. The blanket beneath you smells faintly of soap and dust, a mix that somehow feels clean and stale at once. For a moment you do nothing. Just listen to the ticking of your watch, to distant hooves clattering on wet cobblestones, to the scrape of a neighbour dragging a chair across the floor above. It all blends into a lullaby of the ordinary. You think about tomorrow and the next day and the day after that, not in fear, but in plain mechanical recognition. The days roll forward like a great iron wheel, and you're simply beneath it, pushing along. Still your mind wanders just for a moment to what could have been. You imagine yourself in a different coat, one with brass buttons or perhaps no coat at all, walking barefoot on a warm beach, someplace without ledgers or lamp soot. You wonder what a man like you would have been in another century. A stonemason, a monk, a farmhand in a place with air that smells like growing things, not ash. You chuckle quietly to yourself. An American man shouldn't get too caught up in his feelings. It's a distraction, plain and simple. Distractions breed mistakes, and mistakes get noted, filed away, remembered, especially when your good name matters more than the cash in your pocket. You look at the letter one more time. Your brother's hasty scrawl seems more desperate in the dimming light. You want to write back, tell him you get it, that you've thought about leaving too, that your days feel cramped and suffocating like neckties wound too tight. But you can't find words for that without sounding weak. American men don't admit weakness, not even to family. You lie back down, boots already off, shirt still fastened. You won't strip down completely until you absolutely have to, part routine, part precaution. You read a story once in Harper's about a man who had to escape a burning building, barefoot and half-dressed. You swore you'd never be caught like that. The ceiling glows dimly now, reflecting the flicker of streetlights through the warped window pane. You stare at it until it transforms into something else, maybe a chart or a web of fractures reaching towards somewhere better. You turn your head and catch something unusual, a low hum, constant and steady. It's the new boarder's pump organ in the adjoining room. He plays it after dark, always the same 3 hymns, always at a crawl. He never vocalizes, just lets the melody seep through the walls like smoke. Some boarders grumble, others take comfort in it. You find it peculiar but oddly soothing. You sit up again, long enough to strike a match for your candle for the first time tonight. These days you only burn it for 10 minutes daily, just 10, enough to get through one page of the novel you've been rationing for months. Dombey and Son bought used from a street vendor, pages mended with flour paste. Tonight you read deliberately, lips hardly stirring, letting each sentence sink in. It's more than the narrative. It's the cadence, the ceremony, something to anchor yourself to. After 10 minutes, you snuff the flame. You settle down completely now, draw the cover up over your shoulders. You clasp your hands on your chest like you're practicing for something you'd prefer not to think about. And as your vision adjusts to the darkness again, the city outside keeps up its muffled orchestra. Tomorrow will arrive with its boots and account books and bitter coffee. But tonight, for a few short hours, you're nobody, and nobody needs to prove anything. The morning discovers you right where it abandoned you, in bed in the chill, staring up at a fractured ceiling that acknowledges you with cool detachment. But this isn't yesterday's morning. This is Saturday, and though the day starts the same, breath fogging in the air, floorboards numbing your feet, it carries a slightly altered tempo, more relaxed, less rigid, like a shirt with the collar unbuttoned. You sit up and stretch, joints popping like dry kindling. The sunlight cuts in at a changed angle today, illuminating the dust particles floating above your wash basin. You wash just as cold, shave just as precisely, but you do it with less pressure. Even Hargrave doesn't demand timeliness on a Saturday, just your attendance and a pressed collar. Downstairs, the boarding house feels more animated. Mrs. Gilliflower hums a military tune instead of a hymn. Someone laughs freely for the first time all week. The mail carrier drops letters through the slot with a slap. A cat screeches from somewhere it shouldn't be. The city outside is stirring, not for obligation, but for commerce, for tasks, for disorder of its own making. You decide to skip breakfast, not because you lack appetite, but because the haze is clearing early and you have a destination in mind. By the time your boots meet the pavement, you've found the groove. The usual racket and stench persist. Horse manure, fish crates, coal powder in the atmosphere. But there's a crispness too. Saturday is market day. That means commotion, sure, but also colour. You pass stalls draped in every textile conceivable, some cheap and garish, others subdued and refined. The produce vendors holler the names of their goods like war chants. Pears, apples, oranges from Portugal. It's the oranges that grab your attention. Still uncommon, still extravagant. One sits in a stall basket like a precious stone on exhibition. You can't pay for it, but you stop and study it for a beat, pretending to check your pocket watch. You continue on. You reach your objective after a 20-minute walk through changing odours, roasting chestnuts, spilled ale, damp wool. It's a humble building wedged between a pawn shop and a produce stand. Faded lettering on the glass reads, P. Renville and Cowan, Booksellers and Lending Library. This is your luxury. The bell above the entrance chimes as you enter. Warmth flows out to greet you. Not just the heat from the iron stove in the corner, but the smell of paper, ink and dust. Recognisable, reassuring. Mr. Renville glances up from behind his counter. He's a man with spectacles so circular they seem to mirror the world back, warped. He nods once, the way all men of few words do, and returns to cataloguing pamphlets. You move between the cramped shelves, running your fingers along spines that range from cracked leather to cloth-bound blue. Dickens, Wilkie Collins, Darwin concealed behind a curtain. A dime novel series you pretend not to like. Though you've read each one twice, you aren't here to purchase. You've paid your membership $2 a month, and that grants you one book at a time, swapped weekly. You return the old curiosity shop tucked under your arm, and in its place you choose something fresh, something you haven't encountered, with a title that sounds just ambiguous enough to suggest intrigue. Back at the counter, Renville stamps your card without glancing up. This establishment is not meant for small talk, and that's what makes it ideal. You tuck the new book beneath your arm, wrapping it in a handkerchief so the fog doesn't damage the pages. Outside, the street has grown busier. Vendors shout louder. A brass ensemble down the block wheezes out a mangled version of the Star-Spangled Banner. You step carefully past a girl jumping rope and a boy rolling a hoop with a stick. His yell nearly spooks a horse. You cross the street to dodge a puddle that looks deeper than it appears, and your boot still catches the rim. Now your sock is soaked again. You exhale and keep moving. The kind of breath you've mastered, the sort that expels no feeling, only vapour. By now the street's crowded with people, everyone out for something. Sausages, lamp oil, ribbon, rumours. You spot Hargrave across the way, mid-negotiation with a hat maker. He doesn't notice you. Good, you'd rather preserve your Saturday undisturbed. You wander farther than typical past a narrow passage you don't recognise. A man missing teeth offers you a hard candy. You refuse with a nod, courteous but quick. American city manners. Acknowledge but never commit. A chat leads to a tale leads to a plea. Pleas lead to empty pockets, or worse, but still. You turn down the passage, just for a moment. It opens into a small plaza you've never encountered before. There's a man sketching horses with charcoal. A woman selling buttons from jars. A boy juggling pins. It's peaceful here, not deserted, but undisturbed. The kind of space you wouldn't think New York could contain. You sit on a dry bench, unwrap your book, and read the opening page. The print is still crisp. The story begins with a train, a missing trunk, and a woman in disguise. You grin. You can sense already it's one you'll race through. A voice interrupts you, recognisable, hesitant. Mr. Ainsley. You look up, it's the widow from room 6, Mrs. Alder. She holds a small cloth satchel and wears a bonnet slightly crooked. There's a surprised gentleness to her expression, like she didn't anticipate seeing you in daylight. You stand, nod. Didn't figure you for a reader of cheap fiction, you say. She smiles, faint but genuine. Didn't figure you for the type who wanders this far east. You both sit, not quite near, but not distant either. She opens her satchel and reveals a lemon bun from the bakery near the bridge. They bake fresh on Saturdays. You don't reach for it, but she tears it in half and extends it anyway. You accept. The sugar clings to your fingers. You eat quietly, together, surrounded by buttons, horses, charcoal, and the peculiar stillness of a forgotten plaza. No one here knows your name. No one inquires about your salary, and for a brief moment you forget about damp socks, ink stains, and the rigid chair. Back in your room when you both finish, she wipes her hands, tucks the wrapper into her satchel and says, "See you at dinner." Not as an inquiry. You nod. "I'll save you the seat, not beside Mr. Hargood." She laughs aloud, a short, surprised sound, quickly muffled, but it hangs like sunlight caught on glass. You stand, tip your hat, and return to the main thoroughfare. You've spent no money, spoken few words, and yet something has shifted. Saturday afternoons in New York move like molasses, slower than the rest of the week, yet denser somehow. The market stalls begin to droop from the burden of unsold merchandise, and the morning's chorus of hollering gives way to raspy voices and vacant stares. Even the horses seem sluggish, their tails flicking lazily at flies rather than resisting reins. You don't head directly home. Instead, you take a longer path through the city's eastern blocks, where smokestacks cluster like guards and clotheslines flap between buildings like flags of truce. This section of town thrums with a different pulse, one of grime, heat, and the whistle of steam valves. You pass a brass foundry. Its enormous doors are thrown open, and the clanging from within is ear-splitting. Men in sweat-darkened shirts wrestle great moulds across the floor. Their faces burn red in the firelight. One of them, scarcely older than you, meets your gaze and nods just once. A wordless understanding between two different brands of exhaustion. Not far from there, you pass a textile warehouse. The doors are shut, but the windows are cracked, and from them pours the sharp scent of dye and wet wool. You recall your uncle worked here before the mishap. Slipped on a loose bolt, lost function of his hand. They gave him a coin for his trouble and a cordial dismissal. You think of that whenever your own wrist aches from gripping a pen too long. Pain wears many faces. Farther on, the streets transform again, expanding slightly, cleaner, lined with the kind of neat shop fronts that feature window displays, brass clocks, surgical instruments, scientific oddities. You pause before one that sells barometers and telescopes. In the centre is a contraption labelled electrical vitalizer for nervous complaints and general malaise. It looks like something between a fishing reel and a torture device. The label boasts, as seen in Harper's Weekly. You wonder what nervous complaints really means. You've experienced plenty of those. Not the kind you admit aloud, naturally, just the constriction in your chest some mornings, the breath that catches halfway, the thoughts that surge in waves when the city gets too still. But you've never been vitalized, you continue on. The sound of a factory bell pierces the air, not the frantic clang of danger, but the steady rhythm that carves time into segments. Workers begin to pour out of buildings, their coats already in hand, faces drained. You can always recognize who's on the late shift. Their eyes don't quite meet yours. A boy rushes past with a message, satchel bouncing against his side. Another follows, attempting to jump a cart for a free ride. A policeman hollers from the corner, half-heartedly, more habit than correction. You pass a bakery where loaves sit in tidy rows behind steamed glass. The aroma is thick, heavy with caraway. You consider entering, but you spent your last spare coin on lamp oil yesterday, so you keep walking, fingers wrapped around the edge of your coat pocket, as if you might discover something new in there by chance. By the time you round the corner toward home, the sky has begun its slow descent. Gas lamps flicker to life. One by one they hiss quietly, like the city sighing. You catch your reflection in a shop window. Same hat, same coat, but something about your posture seems straighter today. Maybe it's the walk, maybe it's the bun. Maybe it's just the awareness that this afternoon wasn't squandered on ledgers and smudged ink. Saturday is half gone, but it's still yours. Back at the boarding house, the corridor feels stuffier than normal. Someone's been boiling cabbage again. The odour clings to the wallpaper, soaks into the floorboards. You climb the stairs two at a time, not from vigour but from habit. You've learned the precise creaks to sidestep. It's a peculiar kind of intimacy, the one you share with this building. In your room, the light has dimmed to a pale amber. You don't bother striking the candle just yet. You sit on the edge of the bed, strip off your boots and flex your toes against the cold wood floor, the patch of newspaper in your left boot barely held. You take the book from the library, The Vanished Gentleman, and lie back on the bed, one arm propped under your head, the other holding the pages open. The paper is coarse and yellowed. You have to squint somewhat to make out the type, but it's worthwhile. The story sweeps you away, just far enough. A stolen identity, a train bound for Chicago, a secret code inside a watch. You wonder what it would feel like to disappear. A knock again. This time you anticipate it. Mrs. Alder. She stands in the corridor, no bonnet this time, holding a small brown paper bundle. "Cooked apples," she says, slightly winded. They were going soft and I figured, well, it'd be a waste to let them spoil. You thank her more genuinely this time. Take the bundle in both hands. It's warm, heavy with cinnamon and some kind of syrup that's already seeping through the folds. She nods, doesn't stay, but before she turns away, she adds, "Thought I'd read for a spell in the dining room in case you wanted company." She doesn't wait for your reply. You place the bundle on the desk. Your stomach rumbles. The stew has long faded, and your lunch was, as typical, more routine than sustenance. You unwrap the paper carefully. Inside are 6 wedges of apple, stewed, tender and dark, their skins curling like ribbon. The aroma alone makes your mouth water. You eat them slowly, without fanfare. Each bite is warm and clove sweet. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw loosens. You feel, just for these few minutes, like someone is caring for you. Then you wipe your hands, fold the paper into a precise square, and place it in the small tin by the window. You don't discard things like that. It's not about frugality, it's about remembering. The pump organ starts again in the next room, the same hymn as before, slower tonight, almost sorrowful. It winds through the wall like smoke, drifting into your space. Without seeking permission, you allow it. You read 2 more chapters. The vanished gentleman is now hiding in plain sight, posing as a tutor for a blind heiress. You nearly laugh at the absurdity, but you respect the author's audacity, their strength in pretending. Eventually you close the book and light your candle. The room fills with its soft flicker, every corner catching the gold of the flame. You glance at the door. The corridor's silent now. You know the others have retired. You consider joining Mrs. Alder in the dining room. Then again, you've had enough warmth for one evening. You draw the blanket up to your chest and lie back once more. The novel tucked beside you. The smell of stewed apples lingers in the air. The pump organ fades. Outside, the fog presses against the window pane like a heavy curtain, and inside you exhale. Tomorrow will bring with it the return of office bells, ink blotters, and Hargrave's disapproving eyebrows. But tonight you are full and in your own quiet way, satisfied. Sunday morning in New York begins differently. Not silent, no, but gentler. The city seems to hold its breath a little longer. Fewer wagons on the roads, fewer shouts in the alleyways. Even the chimneys smoke slower, as if the bricks themselves are weary. You wake to that stillness. The light through your window is muted, filtered by soot-streaked glass. You stretch beneath the blanket, but don't stir just yet. There's no work to rush for, no Hargrave, no ledgers, just a few long hours of unpaid time and the fragile freedom they provide. Eventually you sit up and wash your face in cold water. No shaving today. That's your defiance. The rough edge of stubble makes you feel faintly dangerous, like a man no longer fully chained to the weak. You smooth your hair but skip the pomade. You leave your collar loose. You pull on your oldest vest, the one with the frayed thread near the pocket that you've been meaning to trim for 6 months. And then you step into the hall. The boarding house is quieter than typical. You hear a low murmur from the dining room, someone reading aloud, probably Mr. Hargood with his eyes too near to the print. A kettle whistles somewhere distant, pipes rattle overhead. You move silently down the stairs and slip out the front door before anyone can ask where you're going. Sunday is when men become wanderers. You join them on the streets, not marching, not hurrying, just drifting. With hands clasped behind backs and heads tilted toward the clouds, you pass gentlemen with watch chains gleaming in the light and labourers with boots already soaked from puddles. You all walk the same way, not toward anything particular, but away from everything else. It's in this rhythm that American men speak to one another, if they speak at all. Near the park, you fall into step beside another man. You've seen him before, never learned his name. He wears a brown coat with a repaired seam at the elbow and chews clove gum like it's something precious. You both nod. The silence between you is not uncomfortable. It's permission. You cross Brooklyn Bridge together, watching the river churn beneath you. He remarks without turning his head, "Bit higher than last week." You say nothing. He continues, "Must have rained upstate." And that is the exchange complete. At the edge of the park, he veers off toward a bench. You continue, boots clicking on stone until the city begins to thin around you. Children toss bread to pigeons. A couple bickers quietly about where to stand for the best light. A preacher on a crate calls out warnings in a voice hoarse from overuse. You listen not to the words but the tone. He's not shouting for God, he's shouting to be heard. There's a distinction. You keep walking until the buildings yield to grass. The sky, still hazy, tries to brighten. Somewhere nearby, a brass band practices off-key, each note chasing the last in a stumble. You don't mind. You find a bench, sit, pull your book from your coat and read another chapter. The vanished gentleman is now being followed by a detective who suspects too little and talks too much. You smile. It's a weak plot, but it's yours. After some time, a boy with scuffed shoes approaches, selling roasted chestnuts from a tin pail. You shake your head. He lingers. You give him your last half-dime anyway, not for the chestnuts, for the boy. You stay on the bench long enough for the haze to lift somewhat, revealing the outline of the city around the park. New York, even in its fog, has a shape you can trace. The curve of a steeple, the hunch of a warehouse roof, the smoke trailing from a chimney you know belongs to the butcher who always overcharges. It's a skyline of labour, not magnificence. From behind you a conversation drifts near. Two men, one older, one younger, talking in tones too casual for business, too careful for friendship. You listen, not from curiosity, but because you can't avoid it. They're speaking in the language of American men, indirect, coded, thick with subtext. Your boy still work at the docks? The elder asks. For now, says the other. They've started asking about his age. A pause then. Best keep him quiet then. You look straight ahead. Men here speak around things. They speak in weather, in labour, in family. They don't say I'm worried or I'm afraid or he's too young and I'm too tired. They just adjust their caps and say less than they mean. It's something you've grown accustomed to. You stand, book under your arm, and begin the slow walk back toward the boarding house. The streets are fuller now. Church bells toll from different directions, overlapping like a conversation you're not part of. Families stream out of narrow chapels in Sunday best. The children skip. The men look relieved to be finished with obligation. The women look tired. You pass a line of men standing outside a soup kitchen, some with hands in pockets, some staring ahead as if already inside. You know that line. You've stood near it before, not in it yet, but you know how quickly a missed payment, an illness, a single cruel twist can put you there. The line is never distant. As you reach your street, a familiar sound reaches your ears, the sharp crack of leather against wood. A policeman chasing boys away from the grocer's cart. They break apart, laughing, half running. Someone tosses a chunk of turnip back at the sidewalk. It hits with a damp smack. You smile faintly. In your room again, you set the book on the desk and sit down. The sun finally pushes through, sending a crooked beam of light across the floor. You hold your hand in it. It feels warmer than the room should allow. You think of the man in the brown coat from this morning, the clove gum. The brief mention of rivers. That's how men look after each other indirectly, quietly, without asking, "Are you okay?" Because nobody would know what to say. You grab your pencil and a scrap of paper, not for anything important, just a list. What needs fixing? What needs scrubbing? What you'll require if your boots fall apart before month's end. But your hand stops. Instead, you sketch the shape of the park bench, the outline of the kid with the chestnuts. A circle for the woman who smiled when you walked by. Nothing fancy, just marks to prove it was real. You set the pencil down and for the first time all week you speak out loud to nobody. Just one word, enough. Not meaning I'm done, but meaning today was enough. By evening, the city starts its slow retreat inward. The bells go quiet. The market stands disappear. Gas lamps blink like exhausted eyes struggling to stay open. You sit in the dining room, elbows resting gently on the table, barely listening to Mr. Hargood complain about a cracked monocle and the injustice of cobblers who won't deliver on Sundays. You nod when appropriate, but your thoughts are somewhere else. On the warmth of the chestnuts, on the widow's apple bundle, on the simple, odd satisfaction of hearing yourself say, "Enough." There's a new man at the boarding house. You noticed him when you walked in, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, too carefully dressed for somewhere like this. He hasn't spoken to anyone, but he eats with slow, careful bites, like he's rationing everyone. You recognize that control. It's the kind men bring back from war or jail or something worse. They don't discuss. You and he exchange a look across a chipped teacup. Just a look, but it's the kind that says, "I understand." No more conversation needed. Later, you go back to your room and light the candle with a match that almost breaks. The flame wavers, then settles. You let it burn longer than you normally would. Tonight you feel generous, not for the light itself, but for what it means. Time, solitude, the freedom to stay awake a bit longer just because you want to. You unwrap your pipe and pack it. A slower press this time. You're not hurrying now. The first cloud rises in soft curls, and you lean back in your chair, letting your spine crack just enough to feel like you're releasing the week. Tonight, you're not interested in the book. Tonight needs something else. You pull the old tin from under your bed, the one with the letters, the folded clippings, the keepsakes too strange or worthless for anyone else to care about. A dried flower, a railway ticket stub to Brighton that you never caught, a list of words you once overheard and liked too much to forget, gloaming, flicker parlour, hollow. You take out one of the clippings, a notice from a month old. Newspaper, public houses to close at midnight. New regulation passed in Parliament. You'd underlined it not because you drink much, but because it seemed like the city itself was closing in by the hour. You recall the last time you went to a publisher, not the kind with velvet benches and menus, the other kind. A small, dim room with a low ceiling and a landlord who only wiped the glasses when someone important arrived. You sat in the corner with two other men, one of whom swore he could fake a railway pass for 2 shillings and a handshake. You didn't take him up on it, but you remember his laugh, thick, wheezy and strangely hopefully. That laugh is one of those things you keep like a coin. You don't use it, you just carry it around. Now and then, men here meet in places like that, to breathe a little easier, not to confess, not to weep, but to forget the exact outline of their lives for a few hours. Sometimes there's a piano, sometimes just a quiet nod across the room that says, "You're not alone in this." You put the clipping back, not because it doesn't matter, but because your fingers are getting cold and the candle is starting to pool into its base. You hold your hands near the flame. You watch them flicker, and for the first time all week, you wish not for more, but for someone to share this quiet with. Don't leave the room again. That night, the city outside seems too big, too damp, too crowded with people pretending to be okay. You've done enough pretending today, so you stay. You sit with your pipe, your candle, and the soft pain in your spine that always shows up by Sunday night. You flip through a few pages of the novel, but your eyes glide rather than absorb. The vanished gentleman has become too smart, too unreal. You close the book carefully, as though it might break, and set it aside. Instead, you reach for your small writing slate. It's just a scrap, really, framed in wood, rubbed almost smooth, but it holds weight. You pick up the stub of chalk from the drawer and start writing. Words. Not ideas, not journal entries, just words. Stillness. Hollow clatter. Moth. Light. Bone. You erase them. Write more. Damp. Step. Worn. Wait. You don't know why you do it. Maybe to catalogue what the day felt like. Maybe to control the disorder with syllables. Maybe because it's one of the few things in your world that nobody else can reach. The candle sputtering reminds you time is always slipping. So you pull out the house ledger, the little red book tucked near the washstand where you track your rent payments. You flip to the current week. Rent is due tomorrow. You run your finger down the page. 7 shillings. You have 6 in your coat pocket. You'll need to talk to Mrs. Gilliflower again. Your stomach tightens. Not from fear, just the exhaustion of needing to explain, to make yourself smaller, to apologise for existing just slightly beyond what you can pay. Victorian men are supposed to be orderly, punctual, solvent. Every shortcoming is a crack in the facade, and once it cracks you don't get to repair it. You close the ledger hard. A thump sounds from down the hall, probably the tenant in room 9 dropping his boots again. He always does that on Sunday nights. You once timed it. 9:13 p.m. every week. Without fail, a man's life becomes so routine that even his exhaustion has a timetable. You lie back in bed, staring at the ceiling, the candlelight dancing faintly across the plaster's curves and fissures. You think about the pubs you didn't visit, the letters you didn't send, the voice you heard this morning, saying enough. You wonder if that voice will return tomorrow, or if it was a trick of rest, a moment of softness you can't afford to expect twice. You reach for your blanket and pull it up. The pipe has gone cold again. The window glass is sweating slightly with the condensation of your breath. You trace a line on it with your finger, an idle habit from childhood, one you never completely outgrew. And then you lie still for a while. You think you'll stay awake, let your thoughts run their usual late-night circles. What if I left? What if I said what I meant? What if someone actually saw? But you're more tired than that, deeper. It's not the kind of tired that invites daydreams. It simply drags you. Let it. Because tomorrow the office will open again. The ink will flow, the boots will click across the hallway floor, and your name, though rarely spoken aloud, will still need to appear in the ledger, cleanly, properly in black ink. And that, in the end, is what men like you do. Monday arrives without fanfare. No rooster crows, no bells chime, just the creak of the bed frame as you sit up, the dull ache in your knees from yesterday's walk, and the biting chill that has returned with cruel punctuality. You rub your hands together before daring to touch the basin. The water, naturally, is still cold. Naturally. The towel is still stiff. Naturally, nothing has changed. But Monday isn't for change. It's for returning to routine, to work, to the quiet performance of obligation. You dress without thinking. Your second-best collar is clean enough. You retie your cravat 3 times until it sits flat. You brush your coat, but skip the waistcoat with the missing button. Today requires as few questions as possible. Downstairs, Mrs. Gilliflower is waiting. She doesn't need to say anything. She hands you tea with too much milk and no sugar. Then she gives you that look, the one that asks if your rent will be on time. Without asking it, you hold up 6 fingers. She nods, already turning away. No shame, not here, not anymore. Outside, the streets have already filled. London is a city that wakes angry. Boots clatter harder. Drivers yell quicker. The fog is thicker today, curling low over the cobbles. Like a threat, you pull your coat tight and join the current, one more shape in the blur of men heading to places that do not want them. When you reach the office, the routine swallows you whole. Hat off, gloves folded, ledger open, pen dipped. It's almost calming, the repetition, the predictable grind. There's comfort in knowing where your hands go, how much ink to blot, how many seconds to wait before turning the page. Mr. Hargrave enters, late again, grumbling about the gas bill. Mrs. Turnbull shuffles past with a stack of papers and a disapproving sniff. Someone sneezes, someone mutters. The room settles into its familiar rhythm. Scratch, stamp, sigh, repeat. At 11, the supervisor makes his rounds. Not Hargrave, the actual one, Mr. Latchbury, a man who smells faintly of lavender and starch and whose presence makes even the gas lamps dim a little. He speaks softly but carries a voice that demands silence. He stops behind your desk. You freeze, just for a moment. Then you straighten the blotter, smooth your sleeve, and keep writing. He doesn't speak, just watches. You feel his eyes like a weight on your shoulders. When he finally walks away, you exhale, not in relief, but in confirmation. You weren't noticed. That's good. Being noticed by Latchbury never ends well. Later, during the break, you and the others gather in the stairwell. No one smokes, yet everyone acts as though they are, hands in pockets, shoulders hunched, eyes cast downward or sideways. This is where men speak in code. I hear the new ledger clerks from Leeds, someone says. Leeds, another answers. That explains the ink stains. You all nod, as if this makes perfect sense. It doesn't, but it fills the silence. In Victorian workplaces, silence must always be filled, just not too loudly. A delivery boy comes in with a stack of parcels. He's 12, maybe, with scabs on both knees and ink on his fingertips. He grins like he knows something you don't. You envy him, not for his youth, but for the fact that he hasn't yet been folded into the machine. He still walks like he owns his legs. You return to your desk. The same stack of forms waits. The same faint smell of mould and paper. The same ink bottle, half full, crusting around the rim. You dip the pen. You start again, because that's what this place is. A loop in waistcoats and wool and numbers that never quite balance, and you're part of it entirely, invisibly. At 12:30, you're called to the back room. It's unexpected, not alarming, not yet, but enough to make your pulse quicken. You brush your sleeves, straighten your collar, and make the walk down the hallway that suddenly feels longer than usual. Each gas lamp hums as you pass beneath it, casting your shadow up the wall like a figure in a cheap theatre. Inside, Mr. Hargraves stands by the tall file cabinet with his arms crossed and his mouth pulled tight. "You've been meticulous," he says, not looking at you. You nod, unsure if it's a compliment or a prelude to disappointment. He flips open a ledger and taps a page. There was a discrepancy last week. Coal figures, 1 ton short on the Briley order. Could have been missed. But you caught it. You wait. Then good work. 2 words, that's all. No raise, no promotion. Just acknowledgement. But in this office, acknowledgement is rare, almost dangerous. You feel taller as you return to your desk. Not prouder, just steadier. For a moment you exist a little more solidly in the room. After lunch, the air shifts. The office gets quieter, heavier. The gaslight flickers in and out of rhythm. The men grow slower in their tasks. Pens scratch more sluggishly. Even Mr. Hargraves slumps in his chair like a cracked statue. This is the part of the day when time betrays you. You check the clock twice. It hasn't moved. A messenger enters with a payment ledger from the copper works. It's thicker than usual, and when you lift it, a small envelope slips out, unmarked, curious. You shouldn't open it, but curiosity is stronger than propriety on a Monday afternoon. Inside, 2 theatre stubs dated last Friday. Balcony seats, the Beggar's Opera. Folded between them is a note she didn't show. Thought you might like them. There's no signature. You glance around. No one saw you slip the stubs into your inner pocket, not for the show, but because someone thought of you. In this building, that's rarer than gold. You spend the rest of the afternoon in quiet thought, not distracted. Your figures still balance, but drifting. You think of Mrs. Alder, of the park bench, of the lemon bun. You think of your brother in Sheffield who probably doesn't get theatre stubs or quiet thanks. You think of the man you passed on the bridge yesterday staring into the water like he was waiting for an answer. You wonder what holds you together. Not money, not ambition, not even duty. No, it's smaller than that. It's the quiet nod from Hargrave, the note without a name, the boy with chestnuts, the woman with apples, the sentence in a book that makes you forget what year it is, the things that don't fit in a ledger but still count. At 5 o'clock the bell rings. Men stand slowly, crack their backs, gather their coats. You close your ledger with care, as if tucking something alive to bed. In the coat room, someone says, See you tomorrow. You don't recognize the voice, but it warms you nonetheless. You step outside. The city hasn't changed. Still fog, still smoke, still the faint smell of manure and damp. But for the first time all week, you don't walk with your head down. You walk like a man who was seen. The air outside is colder than you expected. Not sharp, not biting, just persistent. It seeps through the seams of your coat and settles in your knuckles. The sun is already giving up for the day, folding itself behind the rooftops with the same weary rhythm as the rest of London. You don't head straight home. Instead you walk. No destination, no errand, just motion. You let the streets decide where you go, past gas lamps flickering like winks, past shop fronts closing their shutters one by one. A butcher hoses blood from the cobbles, a seamstress draws her curtains against the dark. You pass a group of dock workers, laughing too loudly outside a tavern, the kind of laugh that covers tired bones and unpaid debts. They lean against the doorframe, passing a bottle in plain sight, daring the constable across the street to care. He doesn't. You keep walking. On a corner, a man is selling roasted chestnuts from a cart that leans slightly to one side. The heat from the brazier rolls out like a blessing. You pause, check your pocket. One spare halfpenny rattles inside. Enough. You buy 6 wrapped in paper that smells faintly of onions. The warmth bleeds through to your hands and you hold it close, not eating yet, just enjoying the sensation of something that isn't cold. You sit on a low wall near the square, beneath a flickering street lamp. All around the city hums, not loudly but deeply, a constant, low rhythm of hoofbeats, mutters, chimneys, whistles. You can feel it in your chest, like a second heartbeat. You peel the chestnuts one by one, let the shells fall at your feet. Each bite is sweet, smoky, soft, like something remembered rather than tasted. From here you can see the silhouettes of people in the lit windows above. A woman brushing out her hair. A man in shirt sleeves wiping his spectacles. A child bouncing in place on a worn mattress. You watch them without guilt. This city is made of watchers and the watched. Everyone pretends they aren't both. A newsboy darts past, calling out headlines from the evening edition. Strike threat at the shipyards. Woman found living in a chimney. Electric lamp tested in Suffolk. Gaslight soon replaced. That last one catches your ear. Electric lamp. You try to picture it. A city without flickering, hissing gas. Without the lamplighters with their poles. Without the yellow glow that makes every face look a little older. A little sadder. You can't imagine it. The chestnuts are gone. You brush your hands, tuck the paper into your coat pocket for later disposal and rise. The sky has deepened to the colour of soot. A few stars peek through, barely visible beyond the smoke. You don't expect them to stay long. As you cross the street, a carriage splashes through a puddle and soaks your ankle. You jump back, swearing under your breath, more out of routine than rage. The driver doesn't stop. Of course he doesn't. You make your way toward the quieter streets where the boarding houses lean in close, whispering secrets in the dark. As you near your own doorway, you see it, a scrap of red caught in the knocker. You pluck it free. It's the corner of an envelope. No name, just a single line written in ink that's begun to run from the damp. You left the theatre stubs, thought you might still want them. No signature, just that. You open the door and step inside, and for once the hallway doesn't feel quite so narrow. Inside, the boarding house breathes its usual musty sigh. Boiled fabric, old wood, and the faintest whiff of something scorched. Probably Mrs. Gilliflower's attempt at pie crust. You stand in the hall for a moment, the red envelope still in hand, boots dripping on the mat. The gaslight above buzzes softly, a quiet halo in the gloom. You slip the note into your coat pocket and climb the stairs slowly, the wood groaning with each step. As you pass the second landing, you hear the usual evening symphony. Mr. Hargood snoring already, someone clanking their wash basin, the widow in 6, humming under her breath. Something familiar, vaguely melancholy. Back in your room, you hang your coat and light the lamp. The glow warms the cracked walls, makes your shadow dance over the dresser like a silent mime. You take off your boots and lay your damp socks on the windowsill, hoping the cold glass might do them some good. You've given up hoping they'll dry. You retrieve the theatre stubs from your desk drawer. They're still there, still dry, still slightly bent at the corners. You match them to the note. Same hand, the slanted loop of the T in theatre, the odd dip in the Y of you. Someone familiar, someone observant. You sit at the edge of your bed and stare at the paper as if it might confess more than it does. Whoever sent it, they noticed you left something behind and they returned it. Not for any reward, just to be kind. Or maybe just to remind you that you were seen. That's a currency you rarely spend being remembered. You tuck the note into the book you borrowed between chapter 7 and 8, just before the vanished gentleman trades names with a banker in Dover. A hidden place, but not too hidden. You'll want to find it again. Dinner is over. The house is settling. The clink of spoons has stopped. Pipes groan in retreat. You have a choice now, to read, to write, to sleep. You choose the middle path from beneath your bed. You retrieve the tin box again, open it, add the note to the others, the flower, the buttons, the page from the map. You hold the tin in your lap for a moment before closing it, sealing it not just against dust, but against the daily forgetting that life insists upon. You return it to its place. Your hands are freezing again. You massage them, then pull at your shirt sleeves. A thread's worked itself free. You tug it, immediately wish you hadn't. Now the seam pulls open just slightly, but there's no fixing it tonight. You'll stitch it tomorrow or the day after that. Or you'll just layer the vest over it and act like everything's fine. That's how things go. You undress carefully, folding each piece with attention, not because they're quality, but because they're what you have. Every garment a defence, a declaration, a quiet hope to stay decent, even when nobody's watching. You slide beneath the blankets, tense shoulders, fabric warming slowly. You settle on your side, listening through the partition. The reed organ begins again, a hymn, distant and gentle. You don't know this melody tonight. You don't have to. Because in that sound, in the notes, in the simple gesture of returning a lost item, there's something you seldom experience in this existence built of ashen documents. Connection. You shut your eyes, not simply to sleep, but to preserve it. Tuesday rouses you with a cough, not yours, but somebody's further down the corridor, rough and liquid, the type that shakes in the chest. You remain motionless for a beat, gazing at the plaster above, listening. One cough, then another, then nothing. You wonder whether anyone will look in on them. You already know. You get up gradually, every joint reminding you of yesterday's journey, yesterday's chair, yesterday's steps. The water in the bowl is even more frigid this morning. Your exhale hovers over it as you splash your face, flinching at the shock. You towel off with the same cloth. It hasn't dried right since Sunday. Your shirt is laundered, but starting to wear at the neckline. You fasten it regardless. There's nothing else available. The pants have been smoothed, the shoes reinforced with cardboard again. The jacket maintains its form if you don't examine too carefully. And so, clothed in dignity's final strand, you make your way downstairs. In the eating area, the atmosphere is thinner than the oatmeal. Mr. Hargood is already consuming his meal, wordlessly, pulling his bread into small fragments. Mrs. Gilliflower serves with the exhausted resolve of a woman who's been stirring pots since sunrise. You settle down, acknowledge her, and accept your serving. It's hot, tasteless, and sufficient. Mrs. Alder is missing. You register this. Nobody else remarks on it. Nobody ever does. In this residence, absence is handled like inclement weather. You note it silently, then continue forward. While you eat, you observe the other residents. Some you identify by name, most you recognise only by routine. There's the gentleman who always chews with his lips sealed and cleans his spoon before each use. The one who examines the newspaper inverted for a solid 5 minutes before noticing. The one who consistently leaves 2 mouthfuls unconsumed. And then there's the recent arrival. He sits positioned against the partition, gaze sweeping the space like he's still standing watch. His jacket is heavy, dark, military style, but without markings. No insignia, no unit. Just the manner he clasps his hands reveals training. He consumes his tea without reacting. It's scalding, you're aware. You've singed your tongue 3 mornings running. You wonder what delivered him here. Scandal, bereavement, or simply the same gradual decline that deposits every man at a rooming house. Eventually you contemplate addressing him. Then you refrain. You complete your breakfast, clean your mug, and exit into the morning. The haze is denser today, a thick yellowish smudge across the roof lines. You can scarcely see the smokestacks 2 structures away. It carries the scent of scorched petroleum, moist fabric, and carbon, the sort of atmosphere that lines your windpipe and lingers as you travel. The avenues feel more confined than normal, the darkness deeper. A woman moves past with a container of seafood, the odour following her like a garment. A child manoeuvres a wagon with metal vessels clattering like skeleton parts. A sightless man performs on a squeeze box at the intersection, his hound sleeping in a box nearby. You pause listening. The melody is uncertain, wavering, not melancholy, but exploring. You toss a cent in the container. You're uncertain why. You've foregone midday meals for less, but this morning the melody reaches you. Perhaps it's the message from last evening. Perhaps it's the absent landlady. Perhaps it's simply the haze. You continue forward. The workplace is more subdued than typical when you enter, not in volume, but in sensation, the sort of stillness that clings beneath everything. The gas fixtures flicker more than they ought. A pane rattles in its setting. Breeze seeping in where the glazing's loosened. You suspend your headwear, acknowledge Hargrave, who doesn't glance up, and take your position. The account book's already positioned, opened to the section you abandoned yesterday, as though it also recalled where you ceased. You start columns, figures, marks, the sweep of fluid, the pull of nib. It's automatic by this point, but not thoughtless. There's a cadence, a discipline a Victorian gentleman is supposed to control monotony, to transform repetition into propriety. Mid-morning a murmur begins near the rear of the space. Not language, just a change in quality, in respiration. You look up. Latchbury has entered. He doesn't stride so much as float, pressed clothing, gloves held in one palm, account book in the other. You fight the impulse to adjust your sleeves again. He isn't observing you, not currently. He halts at Hargrave's station. Hushed words. A document exchanged, then a look toward you. You drop your gaze. Minutes afterward, Hargrave comes over. His tone is quiet, almost informal. Chamber 11, upper level, something of a clerical tangle. They'd appreciate you straightening it. He doesn't pause for acknowledgement. He understands you'll comply. You stand, brush your arms, and ascend the stairway to the upper chambers. You seldom visit here. The atmosphere smells less of fluid, more of carpeting and tobacco smoke. There's a mat, a stand for outerwear, and an entrance with the numeral 11 carved into the glass inside. A gentleman you don't recognise greets you with acknowledgement. Records from the Lancashire route. Some confusion regarding coal measurements. He indicates a pile half the height of your station. You sit. Start again. The figures aren't puzzling, just disorganised, mismatched, obviously recorded hastily or by someone distracted. While you labour, you observe small annotations in the borders, minute dots, strokes, abbreviated writing, initials. You've encountered this style previously. A woman's penmanship, precise, rapid, demanding. You hesitate. A recollection emerges. Years passed. A young woman named Florence occupied 2 stations over at your initial position. She was quick. Too quick, the supervisor stated. People took notice. He disliked that. One morning she was absent. No clarification, simply absent. The markings in this volume resemble hers. Impossible, isn't it? You dismiss the notion, concentrate, total the columns, mark the mistakes, strike through the duplication. At the end of one sheet, you discover a notation. Correct for variance, in case supervisor neglects to transfer row 3 again. Inscribed small, acute. It's a safeguard for an error someone else commits routinely. You grin just slightly. Someone in this structure still values accuracy, even discreetly. When you descend to the primary level, Hargrave raises his eyes. Well, all resolved, you state. He doesn't. Express gratitude. Naturally not. But someone will examine the records, observe that they align again, notice the invisible presence that corrected the disorder. Perhaps. You return to your station. For the remainder of the afternoon, you labour consistently. The figures align. The fluid dries cleanly. The silence remains dense but not oppressive. At 5 in the evening, you shut your volume and gather your belongings. Before departing, you glance toward Hargrave. He catches your gaze just momentarily and offers the slightest of acknowledgements, barely more than a flicker, but it registers. You exit into the haze. Tonight, you journey home deliberately, footwear striking consistently on the pavement, with the awareness, however faintly, that something in existence is functioning as it should, and that somehow you contributed. You reach home just as the haze intensifies into something more liquid, almost precipitation, but not entirely. It settles over your jacket like another covering and penetrates through your collar despite your precautions. The rooming house entrance resists slightly as you force it inward. Within, the corridor's heated but not inviting. The gas fixture sputters overhead like it resents the task. You suspend your jacket and headwear, flex your digits, and stop. The eating area is silent, too premature for dinner, too delayed for afternoon refreshment. Just the intermediate hour when the residence feels like it's suspending its breath. Upper level, you move past Mrs. Alder's entrance. Still shut, still no noise, you pause, contemplate knocking, but you refrain. Victorian courtesy can be merciless in its constraint. You're not relatives, you're not authorised. So you proceed onward back to your chamber. The atmosphere is heavy, the panes fogged from within. You clear a circle with your arm and look out. The avenue below is nearly vacant. A dairy wagon clatters past. A lamp attendant moves with functional, rehearsed elegance, igniting the posts sequentially. His implement sways, catches lifts, fire appears. It's a performance, one you've observed countless times, but tonight it resembles ceremony. You ignite your own fixture, draw the fabric, and start preparing your single heated meal of the evening. There's not much available, a modest amount of legumes, half an onion, and the end of a loaf that's become more exterior than interior. Nevertheless, you dampen it in stock, slice the onion finely, and position the vessel over the small burner that protests when lit. The aroma is superior to the flavour will be, but that's half the challenge, smelling like solace as it bubbles. You extract your footwear. Your stockings are moist again. The left ankle has split open. You arrange them over the rear of your seat, near enough to the burner to dry, but not scorch. You consider repairing them, then reconsider. You've got 2 additional pairs, one nearly intact. You consume deliberately, spoonful by spoonful, observing the fire beneath the vessel. Even after the container is vacant, the heat establishes in your stomach, not entirely fulfilling, but grounding. It confirms you're still present, still vertical, still nourishing yourself with whatever little you possess. After cleaning the container in the bowl, you position yourself by the pane and retrieve your notebook. Not the account book, not the container of fragments, just the small diary where you occasionally inscribe things you'd never voice aloud. You don't inscribe sentences. Tonight you inscribe a catalogue, things I accomplished today that held significance. 1. Repair someone else's account book. 2. Didn't articulate when silence was more compassionate. 3. Contributed my final cent to a child with a melody. 4. Observe the gas fixtures illuminating you cease. There, that seems like sufficient. You shut the volume, tuck it under your cushion and recline. The seat protests softly through the partition. You detect someone clearing their windpipe. The entrance shuts. Conduits moan like a resting creature. The residence settles into itself. And then, faintly, movement in the corridor. Stopping outside your entrance, you don't shift. The tap never arrives. The movement continues, then diminishes. You stand just long enough to engage the fastener on your entrance. Not from apprehension, from ceremony, because that's what Victorian gentlemen do. They secure whatever little they can. You don't retire immediately. Instead, you remain near the burner, observing the small fire through its iron bars. The radiance pulses gently, projecting your silhouette across the distorted floorboards in extended oscillating strokes. You extend your digits toward it and envision for a brief, stolen instant that this heat might endure through the darkness. Victorian residences don't retain warmth. They accumulate it grudgingly in angles and undercoverings. You've discovered how to capture it with calculated a covering under the fabric, stockings on the heating element when it functions, newsprint beneath the sleeping surface, an additional wrap under the paper cushion to prevent your neck from stiffening by sunrise. Strategies, all of them quiet strategies exchanged between gentlemen-like confidences. You allow the fire to expire naturally and return to the pain. The haze is elevating ever so marginally, exposing a metropolis that is never entirely motionless. Across the avenue, an illumination trembles in the pane of a timepiece craftsman's establishment. A profile moves behind the fabric. Elevated, spare, exact. You picture him adjusting timepieces alone, each sound a small resistance against chaos. You comprehend the sensation. A sound in the corridor interrupts your considerations. Your palm moves reflexively toward the fastener, but you halt short. The movement is slow, deliberate, not cautious, just fatigued. An entrance opens and shuts 2 chambers away. You release air. The structure communicates in noises, and by this time you've acquired the vocabulary. You retrieve your volume. Not the diary, but the fiction, just a few sheets before sleep. The disappeared gentleman is in danger now, located by his adversaries, trapped in a station facility somewhere in Wales. But instead of escaping, he rotates and confronts them, courageously, recklessly. You respect him for it. He selects disclosure over concealment, a privilege, really. You indicate the sheet with a ticket fragment, the one from the playhouse, now worn at the border, and shut the volume. You stand and commence the quiet procedure of securing your chamber to the darkness. You extinguish the fixture, draw the fabric, arrange your jacket across the seat precisely. You verify the fastener again, though you understand it's engaged. The sleeping surface is frigid naturally, but you heat it rapidly with form and respiration. You draw the coverings tight beneath your jaw and position one palm under the cushion. As your vision adapts to the absence of light, you register the gentle radiance of the avenue fixture outside penetrating through the separations in the fabric. It creates faint golden streaks across the floor, almost like prison bars. You flutter once, they vanish. You shut your vision, but your consciousness does not quiet immediately. You consider the woman who didn't tap, the movement that stopped, then continued, the restored message, the stroke of fluid that simply stated, thought you might still desire them. You wonder whether she'll address you tomorrow, or the morning after, or never. You wonder whether it's significant. Then you recall the catalogue in your diary. Things I accomplished today that held significance. You append one additional in your consciousness. 5. Anticipated a tap without resentment. It's not theatrical, not valiant, but it seems like something. Your respiration starts to decelerate. The chamber establishes. The partitions cease protesting. The metropolis outside respirates through the masonry like an elderly gentleman in sleep, strained but constant. And finally, so do you. Wednesday commences with a noise you don't. Amusement. Subdued, brief, absorbed by partitions, but unmistakable. You position yourself upright in sleeping surface and listen. A chuckle, then the scrape of furniture, then silence again. It might have originated from the eating area, or Mrs. Older's, or the recent arrivals, though you can't entirely picture him expressing amusement either manner. It's uncommon enough to make you stop. Your chamber is still frigid. The same fractured bowl, the same rigid cloth, the same shirt from Monday, now reworn with calculated smoothing. But somehow the morning seems different, not warmer, not brighter, just gentler. You dress and make your way to breakfast. The space is partially occupied. Mr. Hargood is missing. Mrs. Gilliflower is vocalizing under her respiration as she stirs something in a container, poorly and without pitch, but vocalizing nonetheless. You assume your position. Mrs. Alder arrives behind you. She positions herself across the surface without a word, but she places something beside your vessel. A paper bundle wrapped in merchant's covering. You observe it, then at her. She doesn't catch your gaze, only states from the provisions merchant. Previous day, but still pleasant. You unwrap it, cautiously. Within, 2 dried fruit rolls, slightly compressed but aromatic with spice. You don't articulate. You don't have to. You divide one in half and arrange it on her dish. She states nothing either. This, also, is exchange. As the space occupies, voices elevate, not forcefully, but more energetic than typical. The recent arrival actually articulates, requesting preserves of all items. Someone complies. Mr. Olver narrates a misprint from the publication, a title that accidentally congratulated a gentleman on his own burial. For an instant, even Mrs. Gilliflower expresses amusement. This metropolis may not have transformed, but something within this small space has. You travel to labour with a peculiar sensation of not being isolated. The avenue feels recognisable now, in a manner it didn't a week past. You acknowledge to the lamp attendant, still completing his route. The sightless accordion performer isn't present yet, but his typical intersection is already heated by the vapour opening beneath. The merchant you move past every morning actually acknowledges this time, and you acknowledge. Return in the workplace. Everything is just as it existed. The same stations, the same fluid containers, the same fracture in the eastern pane. But the silence isn't entirely so heavy today. Someone vocalises melody, without pitch, but confidently. Hargrave is already positioned, arms exposed, which signifies he rested poorly. But he provides a sound of recognition as you move past a superior courtesy than typical. You commence your labour. Figures again, cold shipments, account book recordings, the same recognisable movements, but your palms don't suffer. This morning, at noon hour, a clerk from another section moves past your station and strikes twice, just 2 digits on the timber. You raise your gaze. Quality labour on the Lancashire volumes, he states quietly. You react with surprise. I wasn't aware they registered. He doesn't remain for additional, just continues travelling, but the language suspends there like vapour from a fresh beverage. They registered. You labour a bit more upright after that. Your penmanship is more acute, your columns more precise. You absorb more cautiously, as if someone might examine the sheet and discover it deserving. Around 2 in the afternoon, a fresh pile enters. Instead of protesting, you reach for your nib without pause. There's authority in being valuable. By late afternoon, the illumination outside transforms the shade of tin, subdued, frigid, and heavy with carbon. You raise your gaze from your station and capture a glimpse of it through the streaked pane, haze compressing in again, the sort that steals dimension from everything, transforms roof lines into outlines and gas fixtures into smudges. But within, the workplace is unusually subdued in the optimal possible manner. Not rigid, not frozen, just established. No vocalizing from upper level, no surprise examinations. Even Hargrave has descended into something near cadence. He examines through a shipment account book while consuming beverage that's surely become frigid by this time. You complete your column, stand to extend, and on impulse, verify the absorbing material beneath your palm. Not a single smudge. It's the sort of sheet you'd allow someone else to observe. Precise, proportioned, finished. You return to sitting and observe sideways. Across the space, someone has abandoned a small pile of writing material, precisely secured with cord. It's indicated for conveyance. You register the penmanship. Compressed circles, clean angles, the same as the message with the playhouse fragments. For a moment, your digits twitch as if to extend outward, but you refrain. You observe instead. Whoever inscribed that message is in this space. Not some phantom or vision, but form and respiration and jacket and neckline. That alone is sufficient for this time. The remainder of the afternoon passes by in recognizable movements. Nibs scrape, seats protest. A trace of coal vapour circles in through the pane setting. Outside, movement resonates in the passage like a gentle percussion. You labour until the illumination diminishes too distantly, until you can scarcely observe your sheet. Then you seal your nib, accumulate your materials, and stand. As you collect your jacket, Hargrave articulates, not forcefully, just sufficiently. You're consistent, he states. That's something. You react with surprise, then acknowledge. It's the initial compliment he's provided since you commenced here, and it seems genuine. Not adulation, not obligation. Just an observation with substance. You exit into the evening. The haze is so heavy it absorbs your footwear. The gas fixtures radiate like small, exhausted celestial bodies. You travel more deliberately than typical, jacket neckline rotated upward, visage toward the moist breeze. It's in this twilight that gentlemen like you often dissolve into taverns, into passages, into factories and decrepit residences. But not tonight. Tonight you rotate leftward at the produce stand. You don't comprehend why, but your limbs transport you to a recognisable secondary avenue. There's a small previously owned establishment there. Volumes, miscellaneous items, fasteners, smoking implements, damaged timepieces. You've moved past it numerous times, but never accessed. Tonight you do. Within it carries the scent of arid material and aged adhesive. A gentleman behind the surface observes upward, acknowledges, then returns to whatever volume he's simulating reading. You traverse. Your digits trail across spines and timber and metal. You select a grooming implement, absent half its bristles. A vessel with a fragment shaped like a curved celestial body. A pendant that won't release. And then you discover it. A palm reflector, elliptical, with a tarnished metallic reverse and a fracture traversing through the glass like a lightning strike. You observe into it and perceive yourself. Not acute, not complete, but present. You purchase it. You don't comprehend why. You enclose it in your wrap and transport it to residence, like something delicate. Return in your chamber. You arrange it on the cleaning stand precisely. It's imperfect, aged, but it reflects illumination, and that's sufficient. The reflector positions quietly on your cleaning stand, capturing the gentle trembling of your fixture, as if it's attempting to determine whether to retain the illumination or transmit it return. You observe into it again, momentarily. The fracture traversing through the glass divides your reflection in two. You express humour, not in amusement but in acknowledgement. You've experienced like that for years. You cleanse your visage deliberately tonight, more cautiously than typical. The cloth is rigid but heated from being suspended near the burner. You stroke your epidermis dry, Maneuver a palm through your hair and observe down at your digits. Fluid still remains at the creases. It consistently does. You cleanse again, routine more than expectation. Outside, someone's producing whistle notes in the passage. Not a melody you identify, not even genuinely a melody. Just a few irregular notes repeated excessively. It diminishes after a duration, replaced by the distant vocalization of a hound and the slow rotation of a wagon, heading to residence late. You access your pain an increment to allow in some atmosphere. The haze is still heavy, but not oppressive. It circles around the pain setting like vapour, delivering with it a chill that intensifies your perception. On impulse, you extract your diary and access to a fresh sheet. You don't comprehend what you're going to inscribe. Then, with the same reflexive ease as respiration, your palm commences to shift. Tonight I do not experience isolation. I am isolated, affirmative, but not vacant. Something retained, something subdued, something genuine. An acknowledgement from an unfamiliar individual, a restored message, a fractured reflector still reflecting. You cease there, it's sufficient. You shut the diary, arrange it beside your cushion and position yourself at your station. The metal container is present, you access it without pause. Within the ticket fragments, the seed material, the angle of that initial message. And this time, you append something fresh. You arrange a fragment of material in half and inscribe 2 words, not abandoned. You don't authenticate it. You don't have to. The container shuts with a gentle sound. Your chamber is still dim, still cool, but not vacant. There's a substance to it this time, a solace, as if it's acquired the form of you and selected finally, to establish around you instead of resisting. You draw the covering around your appendages and recline in the seat. From the level overhead, you detect the slow strike of movement. Someone traversing. 4 movements. Rotate 4 movements, return. A gentleman's ceremony. You've executed it yourself. Many darknesses. But not tonight. Tonight you remain motionless. You access your volume again. Just a few sheets. The disappeared gentleman has rotated himself in by selection. The investigator is perplexed. The reader less so. You comprehend. Sometimes capitulation is just another expression for being prepared to be observed. You set the book down carefully. You undress without hurrying, folding each piece with care. There's dignity in that, especially when nobody's watching. Most of all then. The mirror catches your attention one more time. As you settle into bed, your reflection vanishes in the darkness. Only the fracture remains, narrow, pale, truthful. You stare at it until your eyes start to burn, and then you drift off. The dawn arrives like a cautious cat, silent, soft-footed, uncertain, almost sorry. A dim blue light seeps through the drapes, throwing long shadows across the floorboards. You wake with a blink, uncertain what roused you. No footfalls, no conversation. Just light and breathing and the faint groan of wood as the house settles in its bones. You sit up without complaint. Even your joints seem willing to cooperate for once. There's stiffness, sure, but not the grinding kind, the earned kind, the sort that reminds you the stretch is deserved. You clean up, you get dressed. The mirror welcomes you, with that familiar crack now. But this morning it seems almost intentional, like the reflection is giving you a wink. Down the hall, the smell of toast hangs in the air. Somebody's awake early, a first. You come downstairs to discover Mrs. Alder already sitting, newspaper in hand. She's reading aloud, just above silence, lips working like a murmured prayer. You don't break the moment, just take a seat, pour some tea and slide the sugar her way. Without being asked. She nods without glancing up. Another man walks in. A fresh boarder? No, just someone who's typically quiet. He mutters a greeting. You mutter one back. This is how a home takes shape, quietly, piece by piece. Breakfast unfolds without incident, which is its own blessing. You head out onto the street with your scarf tied tighter than normal. A soft breeze winds around the buildings like a cat chasing shadows. The newspaper kid on the corner throws a copy too far and it drops near your feet. You lean down, pick it up, and give it back. He flashes a gap-toothed, thankful grin and says, "Thanks, mister." You're mister now, apparently. Advancement. The streets feel like they belong to you today, not in some grand sense, not with possession or pride, just familiar, recognised the same way. A trampled path through grass becomes a sort of quiet ownership. You walk past a shop window and see a reflection, unbroken this time, the glass intact, the image sharp for a moment. It catches you off guard. You pause, adjust your collar, and study your face like you're seeing it fresh. Not youthful, not aged. Here, that's all. At the office, you claim your regular spot. Ink, paper, breathing, and the gentle ticking of pens around the room. But something's changed. You don't steel yourself for the day. You step into it. The day moves forward, not rushing, not dreading, just onward. By late afternoon, a note shows up, creased, no name. You know the handwriting. 2 words. Thank you. You're not sure what it's for, but you grin anyway. You slip the note into your vest pocket, feeling the sharp edge press against your ribs like evidence. Walking home, the fog drifts in again, soft and shallow, wrapping around lampposts and boot heels. But it doesn't feel threatening anymore, just another kind of quiet. You take the longer route back, not to postpone the evening, but to savour it. When you arrive at the boarding house, a faint warmth greets you at the door. Not temperature, but presence. You walk up the stairs. The fractured mirror is waiting, and in it you see a man who hasn't transformed the world but has found peace with his piece of it. And maybe tonight that's sufficient. The next day, the noise starts earlier than usual. You're lacing your boots when you notice it. Pans clanging in the kitchen, a door swinging too hard downstairs, followed by the distinct thud of coal being delivered. Mrs. Alder shouts something incomprehensible over the racket, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. You smile. The house is alive and so are you. The air's colder this morning. You can sense it through the floorboards, through your sleeves, through the whisper of the window pane. Autumn has turned into something sharper, more insistent, the kind of cold that pushes men toward wool and stillness. You loop a scarf twice, pull on your gloves, and walk out onto the street just as a chimney sweep hurries past. He's young, maybe 16, with soot on his eyelashes and a bounce in his walk. He whistles even though black dust clings to his collar. Not long back, you might have turned away. This morning you nod, and he nods in return. You walk quicker than usual, not from pressure, but because the morning feels crisp in that energising way, like biting into an apple before it's sweet. The city is noisier, more vibrant. Horses huff, wagons groan, boot heels strike stone, and someone on the corner is hawking roasted chestnuts from a brazier that spits with warmth. You purchase one without hesitation. It scorches your fingers and tongue in the finest way. At the office, something surprising awaits you. A smile from Hargrave, a genuine one, subtle, brief, but clear. He gestures to a pile of shipping manifests. Your calculations last week aligned perfectly. Uncommon that you extend a courteous nod. Inside, though, something loosens. You hadn't noticed how tightly you'd been holding tension for weeks now, hoping to be noticed, to be valued, even if only in account books. You settle at your desk, the familiar rhythm already humming through the space. Pen to paper, page to pile, the machinery of men moving forward. But this morning something changes. You hear it. Not just the scratch of nibs or the wheeze of aging lungs, but the breathing of the space itself, the way the whole room draws in when a delivery comes, the way it releases when the clock hand creeps past one and nobody moves toward lunch. You are woven into this machinery now, no longer strange, no longer provisional. You understand something else, too. This desk belongs to you. The ink marks, the dull knife blade, the corner where the wood is worn smooth by your own arm. You have a place here. It's not magnificent, it's not celebrated, but it's substantial. At noon, Hargrave beckons you. You anticipate criticism. Instead, he asks you to follow him downstairs into the warehouse. You've never entered. You trail him through a passage that reeks of dampness and sawdust, past crates, labelled in smeared pencil and ropes that dangle from ceiling beams like drowsing snakes. He pushes open a side door. Inside, rows of towering shelves, weak lanterns, and a chill that tastes metallic. He points to the left. There. That's where the genuine records exist. Older ones. Shipments from 73, possibly before. We're verifying inconsistencies. Thought you could begin recording them. You look at the dusty volumes. The ink has dimmed. The bindings split. This isn't discipline. It's confidence. You push up your sleeves and move forward. The first volume is heavier than you expected. It protests when opened, as if resisting resurrection. The handwriting is spidery and elegant, and as you start to transfer it into a fresh ledger, you understand you're no longer just occupying space, you're safeguarding it. The warehouse is silent in a different manner than the office. Slower, heavier, sounds drop like stones instead of paper. The groan of a beam, the crack of cord, the distant crash of something too weighty being dropped too carelessly. But nobody shouts, nobody swears. The workers here operate with practiced precision, like men inside a sanctuary built of crates and account books. You spend the remaining afternoon hunched over the old volumes, sleeves rolled, hands marked with ink and grime. Some ledgers are nearly impossible to read, written in faded brown script that curves like smoke. Others are packed with margin notes. Missing 3 barrels. Verify invoice again. Cargo. Damaged by water. Don't charge. These aren't merely numbers. They're testimonies. You begin to detect them. The paper reveals things nobody in the office ever spoke of. There was flooding once, a blaze another time. One of the dock workers, Dobson, apparently disappeared in 77 with an entire crate of cinnamon bark. The notation about him is scratched furiously into the margins. Dobson never came back. You copy the sentence exactly and grin. This isn't tedious work, it's recollection. You pause only once, leaning against a cold stone column, arm aching. Your stomach rumbles, but you pay it no mind. In your lap sits a record from the spring of 1872. For reasons you can't name, you find yourself stopping at a specific shipment. 2 crates of saffron headed for Liverpool, marked handle with extreme care. Value exceeds £40. Someone had underscored the phrase. You stare at it longer than needed. You imagine the crate in your thoughts, the fragrance, the danger. Someone packed it with shaking hands. Perhaps someone else unsealed it and inhaled sunlight and spice. Suddenly the warehouse doesn't seem cold any longer. By closing time you've completed half a new ledger. Hargrave comes back, takes a quick look, and without speaking leaves a fresh pencil on your workspace. Not a remark, not an instruction, a token. You depart late, well after the others. The street outside is wrapped in dusk. The fog's lighter tonight, gliding across the cobblestones like fabric. Somewhere a gas lamp ignites with a snap. You feel settled, not victorious, just settled. You pass the chestnut cellar again, and this time purchase 2. One for now, one for your coat pocket. You enjoy the thought of discovering it later, when your hands are freezing. At the boarding house, there's an envelope tucked under your door. The handwriting is unknown. You open it cautiously. Inside, a sheet of heavy cream paper, folded with precision. The message is brief. To whoever sent back my note, you were correct, not forgotten. No signature, just a pressed violet tucked in the crease. You look at it for a long moment. Then slowly you retrieve the tin box from your drawer, lift the lid, place the flower inside. It doesn't matter who sent it or the reason. What matters is that the world, even this grimy, grey, soot-stained world, still catches you off guard, still acknowledges you occasionally, as if to say, "You're here. I notice you." You close the box, slide it under your bed, and for the first time in weeks you sleep without visions because you no longer need to flee. You're already where you're meant to be. The next week opens with a scrape of chairs and the clink of spoons against porcelain. Breakfast is more subdued now, not because people are voiceless, but because you are altered. The volume of the world has dimmed somehow, as if everything is cushioned in an extra layer of fabric. At the boarding house table, Mr. Evans reads aloud from the newspaper again, something about a foreign crisis across the continent. But you only partially listen. Your mind is still in the warehouse, encircled by dusty ledgers and the peculiar calm of being unnoticed and undisturbed. Mrs. Alder scolds someone for leaving fragments on the sideboard. You sip your tea, slowly. It's not warm enough. It never has been, but the rhythm of the morning feels more tolerable now. You're beginning to recognise it, not as tedium, but ritual, repetition as ease, repetition as confirmation that you're still here, still rising, still returning to something beyond yourself. The fog is so heavy it looks like exhaled breath, the kind that hovers before your mouth on winter mornings, phantom-like and fleeting. You cross the street to work with your scarf secure, gloves tugged tight and head bent. Everything appears the same as yesterday, and yet you feel altered, like something inside you has realigned, subtly but irreversibly, the way a bone quietly mends after a break. The clerk room is shadowy when you arrive. No Hargrave yet, just the sound of a few early workers rustling through their notes, warming their hands over the radiator pipe that runs beneath the front desk. You nod toward them. They nod in reply. It's curious how these small exchanges carry such significance. Now, before anyone else shows up, you take a quiet detour down to the warehouse again. No instructions, just an urge. You want to examine the ledgers again. There's something comforting about them, about their fragility and endurance. How a smudged name or incorrect digit can echo forward through years of bookkeeping or vanish entirely into the paper folds. You trace a faded name with your fingertip. M. Alcott. Not a name you've heard, nobody you recognise. But somehow you wonder if he pondered the same things you do when he signed this page. Whether he mattered, whether he'd be recalled, whether anyone would read his numbers again in a different era. Then the warehouse door swings wide and Hargrave walks in, holding 2 envelopes. He stops when he spots you. Didn't expect you down here. You straighten reflexively, just verifying the record shelf, ensuring things were organised. He nods once. Good. I was hoping you'd embrace this aspect of the work. He hands you one of the envelopes. Inside is a tightly folded assignment sheet. Temporary position, ledger verification clerk, dockside location, starting Monday. You blink. You're moving me. He shakes his head. No, lending you for 3 weeks. They need someone quick with figures who doesn't mind wet floors and terrible tea. I told them I had the right person. You pause. You appreciated the desk, the warmth, the pencil left beside your work. But you also appreciate this. The motion, the uncertainty, the opportunity to be more than a shadow in the corner of a cramped space. I'll do it, you say, startling even yourself with how rapidly it emerges. Hargrave smiles. Knew you would. You tuck the letter into your coat and go back to your usual desk upstairs, passing the others now filing in with drowsy eyes and frost on their boots. Nobody says much, but one nods at you and you notice he's wearing the same style of wool scarf you have, the kind from that vendor 2 streets over. Small signals. Quiet connections. The city might be enormous, but parts of it are beginning to feel more intimate. Not in a restricting way, in an anchoring way. You sharpen your pencil, you write today's date in the corner of a fresh ledger. You're prepared to start again. The dockside office is nothing like the clerk's room you've become accustomed to. It reeks of salt water, mildew and pitch. The windows are streaked with soot and bird droppings. The floorboards tilt gently to one side as though the structure itself has resigned to sinking into the river. Eventually. You arrive with your satchel, your scarf still damp from the fog, and the quiet resolve of a man who's finally discovered his footing, even if that footing now rests atop creaking planks and the occasional rodent scurrying beneath the stairs. The head clerk here, a man named Mr. Rennick, doesn't glance up when you walk in. He simply points to a stool by the window and mutters, "Ink's in the drawer, don't touch the top shelf," then returns to his calculations, which he seems to be executing without moving his lips, but with the fierce concentration of a man attempting to solve a riddle in a burning building. You sit, you begin. The ledgers here are thick, water-damaged beasts. The pages have expanded and warped over time, and each one feels like lifting a section of damp wool. The numbers are frantic, scrawled mid-transaction by dock clerks whose hands must have been half numb. Half of them are in abbreviations or cipher, sprinkled with slang you can barely interpret, but you recognise something beneath the disorder. It's still a narrative. Shipments received, goods sent, weights adjusted, disputes marked in shaky red ink. 3 crates rum absent, one line reads. Then below it, in different handwriting, "Inspect the hold." Barlow drinks. You grin. Even here, among the clamour of dock traffic and the distant shout of stevedores unloading crates, the ledger tells its realities if you're quiet enough to hear. At midday, you step outside for fresh air and nearly get struck by a cart stacked high with barrels of whale oil. The driver shouts something vulgar, but you're too distracted by the sight of the river to mind. The Thames shimmers under a rare sliver of sunlight. Filthy, yes, but mighty, always flowing. You lean on the railing and watch as cranes hoist tea chests, spices, and something marked India silk priority. You wonder where the crates will land, whose table, whose shop window, whether any of those people will realise that their goods passed through your hands, even just on paper. And then it strikes you. You're not invisible anymore, not just a line in a ledger or a name on a boarding house roster. You're part of the mechanism now, the immense, grinding, wheezing beast that is London. You don't command it, but you are within it. A gear, perhaps, or a hinge. Small, yes, but necessary. Back inside, Rennick mutters. "Good with dates, are you?" You glance over. I try to be. Then verify the import register from April, I think. Someone scrambled the port logs. You nod and get to work. You lose yourself again in the scent of brine and ink, in the satisfaction of finding structure in disorder, in the strange pride of correcting an error made 3 years ago by a man you'll never encounter. Evening arrives and Rennick grunts in approval as you hand him a clean summary sheet. You're quicker than the last one. Where'd he end up? Joined a circus. A pause, not a joke. You blink. London never stops astonishing you. You take the long route home past the cranes, past the idle carts, through alleys where the air tastes of coal and the lamps hang askew. You pass a bakery still warm from its ovens and buy a heel of bread without thinking. You walk and chew and smile because you're becoming something rare in this city. You are becoming recognised. The mornings are colder now. The frost no longer disappears by mid-morning, but clings in gutters and adheres to the railings like persistent lace. You wake before sunrise not because you have to, but because you choose to. There's something about that hour, when the city hasn't quite awakened, that makes you feel like you're ahead of it all, just slightly. You eat quickly, wrapping the remaining half loaf in a handkerchief before stepping into the darkness. The streets are silvered with frost. Your breath floats like chimney smoke, and your boots leave crisp, satisfying impressions on the stone. The dockside office waits, as bleak and damp as always, but now it feels familiar. Yours, even. Rennick no longer disregards you. He grunts in approval when you enter, and occasionally he even slides the sugar bowl in your direction before you request it. That's the nearest thing to affection you're likely to receive from him, and honestly, It's sufficient. You dive into the ledgers like a diver into dark water. There's a rhythm now. Crack spine, flip page, scan left to right, right to left, then verify the columns. Ship names blur together. The Pearl Queen, the Helena of Kent, Fortitude's Promise. You imagine their sails catching wind, their bows cutting through waves. And somewhere distant from here, the cargo you recorded is being unpacked by hands just as rough as yours. It's a peculiar kind of connection, this work. You never encounter the sailors or the merchants, but you sense their presence in every ink blot and every margin note. One entry simply says, "Barrel dropped, smells strange." Another says, "Replace scales, rat chewed." The entire world passes through these pages. Tea, salt, pepper, pig iron, exotic woods with exotic names. Today, Rennick calls you over. Need your eyes on this. He points to a stack of receipts, bundled with cord and suspiciously damp old records. Some fool thought the boiler room was a proper place to store them. See what's salvageable. You carry the bundle back to your corner. The pages are curled, ink bleeding like watercolour. It's slow work, but you discover something intriguing. A recurring name. Mr. Elijah Catterick, Special Manifest. It's stamped across multiple ledgers, sometimes circled, sometimes underlined. The cargo varies. Spices, 1 month. Opium, the next. Then fabric. But the name keeps appearing, and always the quantities seem incorrect. Small discrepancies. Half a crate extra here, 2 barrels fewer there. Nothing blatant, but enough to raise your eyebrow. You mention it to Rennick. He doesn't glance up from his work. Catterick, yes, keeps surfacing. The arithmetic's peculiar. Rennick exhales slowly. He's got connections, powerful ones. Best not to dig too deep. You nod, but your fingers linger a moment longer on the paper. There are rules, yes, but there are also stories buried beneath rules. That night after work, you don't head straight home. Instead, you walk north, past the quiet wharves and along the narrow streets that wind toward the city's centre. You stop outside a small building with a flickering gas lamp above the entrance. Public Records East Archive Branch. Inside it's dry, warm and smells like chalk and parchment. You speak to the desk clerk, an elderly woman with spectacles balanced on the edge of her nose. "I'm researching a shipping manifest," you say. Her eyes sparkle, not with suspicion, but something else. Recognition, maybe. "First time?" she asks. You nod. She waves you through, and for the first time you begin to pull at the thread. The archive is nothing like the docks. There are no shouting men, no creaking ropes, no cold wind whipping in through broken windows. Instead, the silence thrums. It's warm and dry. The shelves tower like ancient trees, lined with boxes, scrolls, files. Layer upon layer of London's secrets, stacked floor to ceiling. The kind of place where memory lives longer than the men who created it. You're led to a reading table by a young clerk with hair like straw and fingers stained with ink. He places a slim register before you, one of Catterick's. The ink is fresh compared to the rest. Someone's been here before you. You scan quickly. The names and numbers tumble past. Spices, silks, Chinese teas, a barrel of medical tincture that smells suspiciously like rum. It's all legitimate on paper, but then you spot it, a scribbled note in the margin, barely legible. Consignment duplicated in June manifest. Verify tally. No initials, no date, just a whisper in graphite. You check the June manifest. And there it is again. Same cargo, same quantities, different invoice numbers. Someone's been counting twice. Selling goods that never actually arrived. Or worse, diverting them entirely. You sit back and exhale. Your breath fogs the glass of your spectacles. Your fingers tap the edge of the table. This is larger than a clerical mistake. You mark the pages, close the file, and walk back through the labyrinth of shelves. Your boots click on the tile like a metronome. You pass a portrait of Queen Victoria staring out sternly and can't help but whisper, "You'd be outraged if you knew." Outside, the sky has turned a thick, soupy grey. The kind of cloud cover that feels permanent. You pull your scarf tighter and head for your rooming house, head down, heart racing. That night, you barely sleep. Your eyes trace the ceiling, following cracks in the plaster like river tributaries. You keep seeing the name Catterick in your mind, over and over. By morning, you've reached a decision. You don't confront him directly. That would be foolish. Men like Catterick don't argue. They eliminate. Instead, you start small. You begin slipping questions into conversation. You ask dock workers about missing crates. You verify weights. You cross-reference shiplogs against customs records. And all the while, you make notes quietly, carefully, a ledger of your own. You start using a system you learned from a former army clerk, a series of dots and lines in the margins that only you understand, a red mark for inconsistencies, a blue one for vanished goods, a small star for anything that reeks of bribery. It's tedious but thrilling. Rennick watches you one day as you work late, candle burning low. "You always this curious?" he asks without hostility. Only when the numbers start lying. He doesn't press further, just nods once. That's all the permission you need. Weeks pass. You gather pages, threads, whispered rumours. You track not just Catterick, but others too. Names like Lyle, Beecham, Harrow. Men who float above the docks, faceless and clean, never seen lifting a barrel, but growing wealthy just the same. You begin to understand the city, not as a place, but a pattern. One that rewards silence and punishes truth. But still you persist, one number at a time, and then one day your bundle of findings vanishes from your drawer. No sign of forced entry, no mess, just gone. Rennick notices your face when you see the empty space. "Take a walk," he says. "Not home, just walk." So you do. You head downriver, past the spice warehouses, past the tannery, past the fish markets with their stench of salt and sea rot. You walk until your breath steadies and your anger cools to a slow burn. You think about leaving it all, about forgetting the names, the dots, the lies, about going back to numbers that don't talk back. But then you see something. A boy no older than 12, loading a crate twice his size. He strains, groans, nearly drops it. Nobody helps. You remember what it was like when you started. The cold, the silence, the invisibility, and you realise you don't get to quit, you don't get to disappear, because now you know, and maybe, just maybe, that means you owe something to the next man who picks up a pen and dares to question what's written. By now the fog is part of your morning. It embraces your coat, clings to your cuffs and curls into your collar like a persistent whisper. You step into the streets, not as a newcomer, but as someone shaped by them, rubbed smooth by the same stones, hardened by the same air. You no longer ask where you're headed, you simply move. The ledgers come easily now, you don't just copy. Your hand adjusts for errors before they materialise. You anticipate shortages, flag overstatements, recognise the smug fingerprints of those who think themselves cleverer than the ink they leave behind. You've become a quiet guardian of the docks, and yet nobody knows your name. The men in waistcoats pass you in hallways. The ship captains nod vaguely in your direction. Rennick still grunts instead of greeting. You exist like a corner beam in a warehouse, solid, useful, but unnoticed. But something's shifted. It begins one Thursday. You're summoned, not asked, but instructed to report to the dockmaster's office, a place you've never entered. You glance at Rennick, but he doesn't look up. So you go. The stairs creak under your weight as you climb. The hallway smells of varnish and coal smoke. At the end, a door, and behind it, a man with white whiskers and a gaze like cold steel. He gestures to the seat across from him. "You've been digging." You say nothing. He slides a sheet across the desk. It's one of yours, your dots, your red ink, your neat script. Your hands don't shake, but your lungs tighten. He doesn't accuse, he simply speaks. Impressive work. And foolish. You almost laugh. Almost. Do you think the city runs on honesty? He asks. Do you think the grain arrives on time because men follow rules? You answer quietly. I think it rots slower when someone's watching. That gives him pause. He leans back, taps a pipe against the edge of his chair. Finally he says, You've got two choices. Keep scribbling in ledgers or come upstairs. Learn the gears behind the cogs. You ask, And what would I be learning? He smiles without warmth. The art of seeing clearly and choosing when to speak. It's not a bribe, it's a door. And for the first time you hesitate. You leave without answering. You walk slowly, head low, boots echoing across polished wood. The air outside tastes of iron. That night you sit by your window. The city is a sea of lamps. You can't see the river, but you hear the gulls. Always the gulls. You pull out a fresh ledger. Not for the dockmaster, not for Rennick, for yourself. You begin writing, not in code, not in red ink, not in dots and dashes, but in full sentences. You write about the man who paid a boy in biscuits instead of wages, about the barrel that fell because it was packed too hastily, about the bribes, the threats, the man who offered you a position without ever saying the word corruption. You write because the silence has weight now, and maybe someday someone will read it. Maybe not. But you'll keep the pages dry, ink sharp, names spelled correctly. You'll preserve the truth, even if it isn't safe, because the truth, once written, can wait longer than any man. The following weeks pass like footsteps down a long corridor, measured, echoing, deliberate. You keep your routine. Ink, paper, silence. But something's different. You begin to listen harder to the conversations that used to wash past you like waves. You notice who flinches when certain names are mentioned. You mark the patterns in the cargo sheets that nobody else checks twice. Your eyes become trained, not just on numbers, but on the invisible tug-of-war behind them. One morning, a name reappears. Beecham. You'd thought he'd vanished, folded into some comfortable exile after Catterick's operation started unravelling. But there it is, Beecham, listed on a consignment of lamp oil, routing through a warehouse you know was shuttered last month. You don't confront. You compile, a page here, a page there, until one night you return to your room and find the window latch undone. No sign of entry, nothing missing, just shifted, a scarf moved, a chair angled slightly off, the distinct smell of pipe smoke you don't own. You don't sleep that night. By morning, your notebook is hidden deep behind a floorboard. You carry only scraps now, codes etched into receipts, a folded invoice marked with a smudge. Your trust narrows, thins like old twine, and yet something else grows in its place, resilience. You remember your first weeks, how afraid you were of missteps, of broken silence, of being dismissed. Now you know the risks and you choose to walk among them. You start training the boy who sweeps the offices, Wilkin. Quiet kid, clever fingers. You teach him how to tally with accuracy, how to hide a note in a cargo manifest, how to tell if someone's read a file and replaced it carefully. You don't say why, but he watches you the way you once watched Rennick. One fog-sodden evening, you and Rennick stand beneath a gas lamp outside the docks. He's got his coat collar up, breath clouding. You offer him a slip of paper with a new anomaly. 2 crates listed, only one ever delivered. He squints at it, then at you. You, always chasing ghosts. You shrug. Ghosts leave footprints. He grunts, but he doesn't throw it away. Later that month, a man from the dockmaster's office is quietly reassigned to Aberdeen. No announcement, no scandal. Just gone. Wilkin notices. So do you. And you begin to understand something else. You're not trying to clean the entire river. That's madness. But you can plug a few leaks, mark the quicksand, leave a rope behind for the next man. The city doesn't applaud you. It never will. But as winter sets in and the warehouse lanterns burn longer, you catch glimpses of change. A shipment accounted for to the exact nail. A supervisor who flinches when your name is mentioned. A boy who double-checks a weight without being asked. You lie in bed one night and think about the man you were, the one who stepped off the cart, knees shaking, boots too thin, and you realise something strange. You haven't just survived. You've become part of the walls, the kind of man who remembers the shape of every crate, the pitch of every lie, and the cost of every silence. And maybe someday, when Wilkin sits where you sit now, he'll do the same. He'll watch, he'll listen, he'll write. Because Victorian London doesn't need heroes. It needs memory. And memory lives longest in ink. You made it, friend. All the way through the alleys and ledgers, the fog and the firelight, the crooked crates and the quiet codes. And maybe, just maybe, you came to see what life really looked like for a man who spent his days beneath the surface of Victorian London, where silence was safety and truth was heavy. Now let the bustle fade. Let the clatter of hooves and the crack of crates settle into the distance. You can leave the cold, damp walls of the docks behind. Let the smell of coal smoke and wet rope drift away. Let the soft creak of ledger paper be the last sound in your ears. Your bed is warmer than that boarding room, your world gentler than the fog-drowned streets. Take a deep breath. Exhale slow. You've done enough for today. There's no ship to tally, no ledger to close, no secrets left to whisper. Just you and rest. Let your thoughts settle like dust on the shelves of that long-forgotten archive. Let your dreams wander where the ink still remembers.